The maps that should not exist whisper of a land at the bottom of the world, a land locked beneath an endless weight of ice. Yet long before explorers dragged their ships through the screaming winds of the Southern Ocean, cartographers in Europe inked coastlines upon parchment as if they had seen what no man alive had ever touched. The Piri Reis map of 1513 sketches Antarctica without its shroud of ice, an enigma scholars argue over, caught between accident and impossible knowledge. Was it memory preserved from a forgotten age, passed like a fading song across civilizations that never met, or a coincidence born from errors that just happened to align with a hidden truth? Beneath the Antarctic sheet, 2 miles thick, lie mountain ranges and valleys, revealed only by the hum of radar and seismic echoes. Some say the shapes hint at architecture, straight lines buried under pressure and frost. Official voices call it geology. But the human mind resists silence. It asks if ice could have sealed away a chapter of history too vast, too dangerous, to leave exposed. If a continent can vanish beneath snow, what else can vanish beneath time? Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. There is a silence that clings to Antarctica, a silence so vast that even the wind cannot pierce it. The continent stretches white and endless, yet beneath its frozen surface lies a story that refuses to die. Scientists speak of shifting ice sheets, of geological upheavals, of valleys hidden under miles of frost. But none of these explanations can quiet the unease that lingers when one studies the maps, the myths, and the fragments of knowledge that have slipped through the cracks of time. The question is not only what is buried beneath the ice, but why it seems that fragments of the past have already whispered of it before explorers ever saw the land with their own eyes. The early 16th century was a time of curiosity and conquest. European empires stretched their sails into uncharted waters, and maps became more than tools. They were instruments of imagination, projection, and power. Yet the Piri Reis map, drawn by an Ottoman admiral in 1513, unsettles even the cautious historian. On its surface, the map blends known coasts with those unverified, patched together from fragments of older charts. But one coastline, etched with unsettling precision, resembles the outline of Antarctica. Not as it appears today, smothered in ice, but as it might have looked free of its glacial armor. How could such a vision exist centuries before radar, before satellites, before even the first expeditions glimpsed the icebound desert of the South? Some scholars wave the mystery away, saying the shape is a distorted rendering of South America, a trick of perspective, a mistake amplified by the fragility of old parchment. Yet others ask whether the map holds the memory of a coastline surveyed in a time long before recorded history, when the world's climate was different, and when Antarctica may have breathed in open air. This thought, of memory reaching across millennia, whispering through maps, casts a shadow across the conventional tale of human civilization. We are told that history begins in fragments of clay tablets, in the ruins of Mesopotamia, in the sands of Egypt. We are told that before this, humanity wandered without structures, without lasting monuments, without knowledge beyond survival. But what if these whispers from the ice hint at a chapter erased? What if civilizations rose and fell long before the names we now remember were ever spoken? The frozen continent has not always been as it is. Geological evidence shows that Antarctica once sat closer to the equator, clothed in forests, rivers, and life. Fossilized plants and traces of warm water creatures buried beneath ice affirm that the land was once fertile. Millions of years ago, trees grew where glaciers now stand. This is no speculation, but a fact carved into stone and bone. Yet it is the span between those deep epochs and the last age of humanity's known memory that provokes unease. Could human eyes have seen Antarctica before the ice reclaimed it? Could ancient mariners, lost to time, have sailed farther south than we believe possible, leaving behind stories that survived in scraps of maps, encoded in myths we no longer recognize? There are those who point to ancient traditions, to stories of lands swallowed by oceans or buried beneath storms. Myths of Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, all dismissed as legend, yet they carry a strange resonance when one looks at the frozen vault of the South. In Plato's dialogues, Atlantis sinks beneath waves, a cautionary tale of hubris punished by nature. In Hindu traditions, vast lands across the Indian Ocean vanish beneath rising waters. These stories are not about Antarctica directly, but they echo the same theme. The Earth remembers civilizations that fall, and humanity forgets. Could Antarctica be another of these erased chapters, its ruins sealed not by sea, but by the slow suffocation of snow and ice? In the 20th century, the development of seismic and radar imaging revealed something startling beneath Antarctica's blanket of frost. Mountains rising like spines of a submerged beast, valleys that stretch in dark silence, and formations that, at least in the eyes of some, looked too angular, too precise to be natural. Straight lines, grids, and ridges that suggested design. The official explanations reduce them to geology, to the restless movement of the earth. Yet the human imagination refuses to stay silent. If stone cities could be swallowed by deserts, if temples could crumble beneath waves, why could not a civilization be buried beneath ice, awaiting rediscovery? It is easy to dismiss such thoughts as fantasy. The weight of academia urges caution, skepticism, the steady discipline of evidence. And yet history itself is filled with discoveries once thought impossible. The ruins of Troy unearthed after centuries of being dismissed as myth. The lost cities of the Maya reclaimed from jungle after scholars insisted they were nothing but legend. The stone city of Great Zimbabwe revealed to be the work of Africans, despite colonial claims that denied its possibility. If such misjudgments could veil ruins standing in plain sight, what veils might ice provide, deeper, more impenetrable than any jungle or desert? Antarctica stands at the edge of human imagination, a continent both real and unreal, mapped yet unmapped, present yet absent from the narratives we carry. The first explorers who dared its waters spoke of endless ice, of mountains rising like ghosts from the fog, of landscapes where no life stirred. They saw desolation. But perhaps what they did not see was more important than what they described. What lies beneath the ice remains untouched, sealed by nature's most absolute barrier. Unlike deserts, jungles, or oceans, ice preserves and erases at once. It entombs without fire, without collapse, without decay. If a civilization lay there, its silence would be total, its survival paradoxical, hidden, intact, yet unreachable. The mind lingers on the paradox. A continent as vast as Antarctica, larger than Europe, remains an enigma not because it is distant, but because it is sealed. And in this seal, speculation thrives. Historians, scientists, dreamers, and skeptics wrestle over scraps of evidence, each interpretation pulling in a different direction. But the heart of the mystery is not evidence alone. It is the haunting sense that history is incomplete, that what we are told is only a fragment of a larger design, that the ice hides not only landscapes, but truths. So the question sharpens. Is the mystery of Antarctica's buried ruins a reflection of something truly hidden, or is it the projection of our longing for forgotten grandeur? Does the ice preserve a story erased by time, or does it merely provide a canvas upon which we paint our fears, our hopes, and our hunger for meaning? The silence does not answer. It only waits. The Piri Reis map is only one fragment in a long chain of peculiar evidence, and its shadow grows larger when placed beside other maps that also defy the narrative of gradual discovery. In the 16th century, European and Ottoman cartographers compiled knowledge from sources now lost. Scrolls, sea charts, perhaps even oral traditions reaching back through forgotten centuries. Among them was the Oronteus Finaeus map of 1531, a chart that traced a southern continent with a striking resemblance to Antarctica's true outline, though depicted without the frozen crust that makes it inhospitable today. Here again arises the same riddle. How could cartographers of the Renaissance know coastlines buried under 2 miles of ice, coastlines that modern science only confirmed with the advent of sonar and satellite imaging? For many scholars, the answer lies in misinterpretation. They say these maps are not Antarctica, but exaggerated renditions of known lands, distorted by limited perspective. Yet when the Oronteus Finaeus map is studied carefully, the rivers and mountain ranges align with those revealed by radar beneath the Antarctic sheet. Such coincidences are difficult to explain away entirely. Were these maps echoes of an ancient survey, preserved through the centuries by cultures whose own origins we can no longer trace? If so, then history has overlooked more than a coastline. It has overlooked a chapter of human exploration, erased by time, dismissed by skepticism. The possibility of lost knowledge stirs unease because it forces a confrontation with the fragility of memory. Human civilizations are built on records, on scripts and stone, but these are easily scattered by catastrophe. Floods, fires, invasions, and the slow erosion of time consume more than monuments. They consume stories. A map preserved in fragments might be one of the last survivors of a much older inheritance, carried forward into a world too young to recognize its true weight. When we study the ice of Antarctica, we are not merely gazing into frozen geology, but into the void left when history falters, when something vast is forgotten. Antarctica itself deepens the mystery with its shifting climate past. The theory of plate tectonics and paleoclimatic studies reveal that the continent once drifted through warmer latitudes, resting in a place where forests thrived. Fossils of beech trees, ferns, and even freshwater reptiles testify to a verdant past. If life flourished there, is it unthinkable that human presence might also have found its way to those shores, whether in fleeting voyages or in settlements long erased by glacial advance? Mainstream science resists this leap, insisting that Antarctica has been locked in ice for millions of years, far before humanity arose. Yet there are always fissures in certainty, small gaps where questions persist. Could there have been windows in climate, temporary thaws, when parts of the land were accessible? Could there have been mariners advanced enough to map it, even if their names have dissolved into silence? Explorers of the 20th century often felt that silence pressing upon them. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, whose expeditions in the 1920s and 1930s opened great stretches of the Antarctic interior, wrote of vast mountain ranges, strange formations, and expanses of land unseen by human eyes. In later years, rumors gathered around his journeys, rumors of discoveries withheld, of anomalies concealed for reasons of state or secrecy. Some claimed Byrd hinted at territories larger than expected, lands beyond the pole that stretched into uncanny dimensions. Official reports are cautious, clinical, stripped of poetry. But the mythology surrounding his expeditions endures because Antarctica itself resists finality. Every discovery there feels incomplete, a half-revealed truth swallowed again by snowstorms. The suspicion that knowledge has been hidden, rather than simply lost, adds a sharper edge to the narrative. During the Cold War, Antarctica became a theater not of battles, but of secrecy. Nations established bases on its frozen shores, citing science, yet always with the quiet undertone of strategic interest. Beneath the surface lies not only ice, but minerals, resources, and perhaps something else that justified veiling discoveries behind bureaucratic reports. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 froze territorial claims and reserved the continent for peaceful scientific research, but its very existence also suggested that what lay beneath was of too great an interest to be left to chaos. When knowledge is tightly controlled, speculation blooms. What is it that must be hidden? What is it that governments fear the world would see? Theories range from the reasonable to the outlandish. Some propose ancient structures buried by glaciers, ruins waiting beneath ice to be uncovered like Pompeii beneath ash. Others imagine entire civilizations entombed, their monuments preserved in crystalline stillness. A more cautious view points to geology itself, noting that Antarctica's ice shields, valleys and peaks that could easily be mistaken for architecture when glimpsed through incomplete radar scans. Yet even here, the imagination clings to possibilities. Straight lines and geometric patterns do not sit easily in the realm of randomness. Where nature tends toward chaos and curve, order suggests design. The human eye, attuned to meaning, cannot help but linger on these images and ask if ice is disguising something more deliberate. The myth of Antarctica as a place of buried secrets echoes deeper archetypes in human culture. The notion of a hidden land, of a realm sealed away from ordinary knowledge, recurs in traditions across the world. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, a northern paradise veiled by impassable ice and storms, home to gods and immortals. In Buddhist cosmology, the idea of Shambhala describes a hidden kingdom, accessible only to the pure of heart, where wisdom is preserved. These myths are not Antarctica itself, yet they reflect humanity's enduring intuition that the Earth still conceals places where truth lies hidden, preserved against the erosion of time. The white continent, inaccessible and untouched, has become the modern canvas upon which such myths are projected. What unsettles most is not certainty, but ambiguity. If maps like those of Piri, Reis, and Oronteus, Finaeus were merely errors, their precision is uncanny. If Antarctica was once forested, its timeline feels too distant to intersect with human history, yet the fossils are undeniable. If modern expeditions reveal structures, they may be geological, but their symmetry haunts the imagination. The truth lies tangled between science and silence, evidence and speculation, memory and myth. The ice conceals not only physical landscapes, but also the boundaries of our understanding. Every question leads deeper into the unknown. Were there seafarers who saw Antarctica before the ice? Were fragments of their knowledge carried forward into maps centuries later? Were explorers in our own age silenced, their findings locked behind treaties and secrecy? Or is Antarctica's enigma not about what is buried, but about what humanity longs to find? Proof that our story is older, stranger, more fragile than we dare to admit. The snow offers no answers. It only covers and waits. The story of Antarctica grows even more enigmatic when seen through the lens of climate change, not of our own era, but of deep time. Glaciologists have drilled ice cores stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, capturing bubbles of air that reveal the rhythm of ancient climates. In these frozen archives, patterns of warming and cooling emerge like the heartbeat of the planet. Yet alongside these natural cycles rests an unnerving question. Could there have been periods brief enough, hidden within interglacials, when parts of Antarctica stood free of ice, fertile and habitable? If so, the possibility of human contact, fleeting or otherwise, cannot be fully dismissed. Geologists point to the East Antarctic ice sheet, which has remained stable for millions of years, insisting that its permanence predates humanity. But there are mysteries within the West Antarctic region, where thinner ice and shifting geology suggest periods of retreat. Studies of subglacial sediments reveal organic material, traces of flora that might once have grown in climates far gentler than the present. Rivers flowed where ice now groans, and valleys cut their way through mountains that stand buried today. The very idea unsettles the mind. Landscapes now locked in silence may once have been green, their contours traced by the hands of ancient waters and winds. And if that is true, is it entirely beyond imagination that human eyes might once have gazed upon those same horizons? The archaeological record, as we know it, provides no direct link. Human history, as told by textbooks, is far too young. Yet the absence of proof is not proof of absence. It is merely silence, a gap where answers might once have been. When one remembers that vast tracts of Earth's surface remain unexplored, that oceans conceal cities drowned by rising seas, and that jungles still hide undiscovered ruins, the possibility of something beneath the ice becomes less a fantasy and more an open question. Antarctica is the ultimate vault, a tomb of both geology and memory, and its silence is unbroken only by those willing to peer into it. In the 20th century, this silence began to crack. In 1958, scientists conducting seismic surveys beneath Antarctica's ice stumbled upon the Gamburtsev mountain range, a hidden massif the size of the Alps, buried under kilometers of ice. Its peaks and valleys lay preserved in crystalline darkness, unseen for millions of years. The shock of this discovery reverberated far beyond geology, for it revealed how much could remain hidden beneath the ice, how much the Earth could withhold even from modern instruments. If mountains of such scale could lie concealed, could not structures, settlements, or ruins also rest in that frozen labyrinth, awaiting their accidental revelation? The human mind, searching for patterns, latches onto anomalies. Photographs from aerial surveys sometimes reveal shapes beneath the snow that appear geometric, rectangles, circles, or ridges too straight to dismiss. Skeptics label these illusions pareidolia, the tendency to see order in chaos, to find faces in clouds or walls in stone. Yet even the skeptics cannot erase the unease that comes when ice forms the shape of a door, a wall, or a road stretching into emptiness. What if the eye is not deceived, but reminded of something long forgotten? The enigma deepens when one considers the legends of civilizations destroyed by catastrophe. Atlantis is the most famous, yet it is not alone. Cultures across the globe carry myths of lands swallowed by floods or fire, of peoples scattered by calamities beyond their power. Could Antarctica be one of these lost homelands, its memory fractured into stories that traveled the world in fragments? Some traditions speak of lands of eternal ice or frozen realms beyond the horizon. They are dismissed as metaphor, but myths often cloak truth in symbols, preserving memory through imagery when words are too fragile to survive. Scientific caution dictates restraint, and rightly so, yet it is striking how often the history of discovery has been preceded by myth. Troy was legend until its walls rose from the soil. The Amazon was dismissed as barren until cities were found beneath its canopy. Even in our own age, LiDAR has revealed civilizations erased by time, but remembered dimly in stories. Could Antarctica, too, hold a truth once sealed in legend, waiting for tools precise enough to uncover it? And then there is the question of secrecy. Governments and institutions guard Antarctic research carefully, regulating access, restricting flights, limiting excavation. The official explanation is safety, environmental preservation, and international treaty. Yet this strict control has given birth to suspicion. What lies beneath that requires so much protection? Whispers circulate of discoveries withheld from the public, of anomalies that never reach publication, of findings locked in classified archives. Whether true or not, such whispers feed the fire of curiosity, amplifying the sense that Antarctica is not only cold and remote, but deliberately obscured. The possibility of hidden ruins unsettles not only science, but identity. If a civilization once flourished beneath Antarctica's sky, it would predate every culture we now call ancient. It would imply that humanity's story is older, more cyclical, more fragile than the linear tale of progress we tell ourselves. It would suggest that civilizations rise and fall not only in deserts or along rivers, but in places we now deem impossible, only to vanish without a trace, save for whispers in myth and lines on old maps. Such a revelation would force a re-evaluation of human origins, of memory, of the fragility of what we call truth. And so Antarctica stands in paradox. Its ice testifies to millions of years of climate, yet within that expanse lie questions science has not silenced. Its mountains, rivers, and valleys are real, but unseen, and their silence invites speculation. Its presence is undeniable, yet its meaning remains elusive. The ice does not speak, yet it provokes more questions than any voice could answer. The human mind, pressed against such silence, cannot help but wonder. If a land so vast can be hidden in plain sight, what else has been forgotten? If mountains can sleep beneath ice unseen, what truths may also rest there, waiting for a time when the world is willing to listen? The silence holds, the snow falls, and the question deepens. Antarctica's enigma is not only its silence, but also the way that silence has been guarded. To understand why suspicion surrounds the continent, one must look not only at maps and myths, but also at politics. In the middle of the 20th century, as nations scrambled for power and territory, Antarctica became more than a frozen wilderness. It became a stage for secrecy. The expeditions of World War II and the years that followed are steeped in rumor and unanswered questions. What exactly was discovered on those icy shores, and why have the records often been so elusive? One of the most enduring stories is tied to Nazi Germany. It is well documented that the Third Reich launched an Antarctic expedition in 1938 to 1939, sending the ship Schwabenland southward. The mission's purpose was ostensibly to claim territory and secure potential whaling resources. Yet speculation has lingered for decades that their interest extended far beyond whaling. The Germans mapped sections of Queen Maud Land, dropped metal markers from planes, and photographed expanses of terrain. Some argue this was nothing more than nationalistic ambition, a gesture of power at the edges of the world. But others point to the curious persistence of claims that Germany sought more, that they suspected Antarctica concealed resources, caves, or ruins worth the peril of exploration. After the war, whispers spread of hidden bases, of technology tested under the cover of ice, of secrets buried far from prying eyes. In the years immediately after, the United States launched its own massive Antarctic campaign, Operation Highjump, in 1946-47, led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd. The official purpose was scientific and logistical, a large-scale test of survival and training in polar conditions. But the scale of the mission unsettled observers. 13 ships, more than 4,000 personnel, aircraft, and heavy equipment dispatched to the world's harshest environment. Why such force, such resources for research? The operation ended abruptly after only a few months, fueling speculation that something had been encountered, something unexpected, something that demanded silence. Byrd himself, in interviews, spoke cryptically of threats from the polar regions, of forces capable of striking with speed and power unimaginable. Official records reduce his words to context, dismissing exaggeration, yet the unease has never lifted. Whether truth or rumor, the convergence of German expeditions and American military campaigns created a mythology around Antarctica that refuses to fade. The barren land became not only a place of scientific curiosity, but of suspicion, an arena where nations projected their fears, their ambitions, and perhaps even their discoveries. If there was nothing there but ice, why so much interest, so much secrecy? Why do archives remain sealed, documents missing, questions unanswered? The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, is often presented as a triumph of cooperation. It forbids military activity, suspends territorial claims, and reserves the continent for peaceful scientific research. Yet its very existence feeds the fire of doubt. Rarely in history have nations so quickly agreed to freeze their ambitions, to lock away an entire continent from exploitation. Some say this was foresight, a recognition of the need to protect an untouched environment. Others whisper it was necessity, that something was discovered which demanded containment, something that could not be revealed without unraveling the story of humanity itself. Meanwhile, the ice continues to guard its secrets. Beneath its vast expanse lie lakes sealed from the surface for millions of years. Lake Vostok, buried under nearly 4 kilometers of ice, pulses with mystery. When Russian scientists drilled toward it in the 1990s and 2000s, speculation surged. What forms of life might have survived in such isolation, sealed in darkness, untouched since the dawn of humanity? When samples were finally retrieved, official reports spoke of microbial life, of strange organisms adapted to extreme environments. Yet whispers spread that findings were withheld, that unusual DNA was detected, that discoveries beyond microbes were quietly locked away. Whether true or not, the secrecy surrounding such projects only deepens the suspicion. What else lies in those waters, preserved in eternal night? The paradox of Antarctica is that every discovery confirms how little we know. Mountains hidden from sight, lakes sealed for eons, fossils that testify to a verdant past, ice cores that whisper of climates beyond memory, and maps that trace coastlines as though eyes had seen what science insists they could not. Against this backdrop, the rumors of lost civilizations or hidden ruins feel less like fantasies and more like questions awaiting their proper language. If stone walls once stood upon Antarctic soil, the ice would have sealed them in silence, preserving them as surely as volcanic ash preserved Pompeii. The fear that emerges is not simply that something is hidden, but that history itself may not be as we were taught. Our narrative of progress, from primitive hunter-gatherers to modern states, depends upon the assumption of continuity. Yet Antarctica suggests rupture, an erasure so complete that only fragments remain. Maps, myths, anomalies glimpsed by radar, expeditions cloaked in secrecy. If there was a civilization capable of mapping or even inhabiting Antarctica before the ice, then history is not linear but cyclical, a tale of rises and erasures, of knowledge gained and then buried. The imagination lingers on the image. Beneath the crushing ice, structures sleep unbroken, sealed away from decay. Perhaps temples, perhaps cities, perhaps nothing more than illusions of stone shaped by the hand of nature. Yet even the possibility haunts us, for it suggests that truth itself may be buried not in archives or libraries, but in the earth itself, waiting to be uncovered when the time is right, or when the ice relents, and so the white silence endures. Nations maintain their bases, scientists drill their cores, satellites scan the endless sheets, rumors swirl, myths entangle themselves with data, and the continent remains aloof, indifferent, refusing to yield more than fragments. Antarctica is not merely a wilderness. It is a mirror for our own unease, reflecting the suspicion that we do not yet know our own story, that what we call history is only the surface of something deeper, something frozen in silence. The snow falls, the wind howls, and the world waits for the ice to crack. Until then, questions multiply, unresolved, unanswered, lingering like shadows beneath the aurora. Antarctica's buried secrets are not always measured in maps or rumors, but in the slow language of ice itself. Every year, glaciers creep forward, grinding mountains into dust, swallowing valleys, and hiding landscapes in their silent embrace. The continent is more than a wilderness. It is a vast archive, a frozen library that keeps records not in ink, but in layers of snow compressed over millennia. Scientists have extracted cores from its depths, cylinders of ancient ice that hold within them bubbles of air older than the rise of human civilization. These samples speak of climate shifts, volcanic eruptions, and cosmic dust that settled upon the Earth long before history began. Yet they also remind us of something more elusive, that the ice is both guardian and jailer, preserving what it conceals while making it almost impossible to reach. The enigma of Lake Vostok illustrates this paradox. Buried beneath nearly 4 kilometers of solid ice, the lake remained untouched by the atmosphere for millions of years. When Soviet scientists first discovered its existence in the 1970s through seismic soundings, they were astonished at its scale. Larger than some of the Great Lakes of the world. For decades, drilling was planned and debated, each step slowed by fear of contamination and uncertainty about what might be found. When Russian teams finally reached its waters in 2012, they retrieved samples said to contain unusual microbial life, organisms adapted to conditions no human eye had ever seen. Official reports spoke cautiously of extremophils, of ancient species thriving in isolation. But in the absence of full transparency, suspicion grew. Some claimed the results were more extraordinary than disclosed, that genetic anomalies suggested life forms outside the known tree of evolution. Whether exaggeration or truth, the silence surrounding the findings fed the same suspicion that clings to all things Antarctic, that what lies beneath the ice may be more than we are told. Other lakes, too, dot the subglacial landscape. Lake Whillans, Lake Ellsworth, and many more yet unnamed hidden pockets of water sealed beneath crushing weight. Each one carries the possibility of life forms unknown, ecosystems preserved in darkness. If biology can survive such extremes, might it not also preserve traces of something more complex? What if ruins, tools, or artifacts could rest in such hidden basins, sealed away as perfectly as a fossil in amber? The imagination cannot resist the thought. At the same time, satellite imagery and radar surveys continue to map the land beneath Antarctica's shroud. These images reveal valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, mountain chains rivaling the Rockies, and networks of rivers carved into stone long before ice consumed them. Occasionally, the scans produce anomalies, patterns of straight lines, geometric ridges, features that to some eyes suggest construction. The official response is always geology, always the chaotic hand of nature shaping what appears orderly. But once again, the human mind lingers on the question. Why does nature mimic design so convincingly in a place where design is least expected? Beyond geology, there are stories whispered from the edges of exploration. In the mid-20th century, some expeditions reported strange formations, caves warmed by geothermal heat, vast caverns large enough to hold cities. Though details are scarce and often cloaked in rumor, the idea of hollow chambers beneath the ice persists. Modern science confirms that geothermal hotspots do exist in Antarctica, regions where volcanic activity warms the land from below. These areas create melt zones, pockets where ice thins, where liquid water flows, and where something could survive or be preserved. The possibility of habitable spaces beneath the ice, shielded from storms, only deepens the mystery. If such spaces exist, what might they contain? The human imagination has always filled voids with story. To some, these caverns hold only geology, stone, water, and steam. To others, they could harbor the remnants of a lost civilization, its monuments preserved like relics beneath a dome of frost. Still others whisper of ancient knowledge, technologies hidden away, waiting to be found. While speculation strays far from proof, the fact remains. Antarctica's underworld is real, vast, and largely unexplored. Whether it holds only silence or something more is a question that no one can yet answer. The deeper one follows these threads, the more history itself begins to feel fragile. Consider the simple fact that civilizations have risen and fallen many times, their monuments buried in deserts, jungles, or oceans. The ruins of Troy, the temples of Angkor, the stone city of Great Zimbabwe, all once doubted, all rediscovered. If these sites could vanish in plain sight, how much easier for a civilization to vanish beneath the weight of 2 miles of ice. We assume that history is continuous, that we know where it begins and how it unfolds. Yet every anomaly in Antarctica challenges this assumption, hinting at ruptures in the story, at chapters missing not because they never existed, but because they were buried too well. The silence of Antarctica also mirrors the silence within us, the hunger for origins, the need to know that our story stretches deeper than what textbooks allow. Perhaps this is why myths of lost continents echo across cultures: Atlantis in the west, Lemuria in the east, Hyperborea in the north. These legends may not describe Antarctica directly, but they express the same intuition: that the Earth itself holds memory, that lands and civilizations vanish but are never truly erased. The ice of Antarctica is the physical embodiment of that mythic silence, a real landscape that embodies the metaphor of hidden history. And so we find ourselves at an impasse. Science digs cautiously, peeling back layers one core at a time, while imagination races ahead, filling the void with visions of ruins, temples, and forgotten knowledge. Between these two lies the truth, frozen in place, indifferent to our questions. Perhaps there is nothing beneath the ice but stone and water. Perhaps there is more: structures, artifacts, a record of a civilization erased by catastrophe. Either way, the ice will not yield its secrets easily. The snow drifts endlessly, sealing the land tighter with every storm. The silence stretches outward, pressing upon the imagination like a weight. And the questions remain, untouched, suspended, waiting like the continent itself for the moment when the ice finally cracks. To gaze upon Antarctica is to confront a paradox: a land both known and unknown, mapped yet concealed, present yet unreachable. Scientists have traced its outlines with satellites, drilled into its depths with steel, and flown across its endless white expanses, yet what lies beneath remains cloaked in secrecy. The enigma is not simply about what may be buried, but about why so many voices across time have hinted at a past hidden under its veil. To linger on this thought is to feel that Antarctica is not only ice, it is absence itself, a void in our collective memory. One of the most striking revelations came in the late 20th century, when satellites scanning beneath the frozen crust uncovered an unexpected anomaly. Near the coast of Wilkes Land, radar detected a massive circular structure buried deep under the ice, some 300 miles across, with a central depression and raised rim. To geologists, it suggested the possibility of an impact crater, perhaps formed by an asteroid or comet millions of years ago. If true, it would rank among the largest craters on Earth, rivaling the one linked to the extinction of the dinosaurs. But its implications reach beyond geology. A cosmic impact of that scale could have altered Earth's climate dramatically, perhaps triggering the very ice sheets that now conceal the land. The thought lingers. Could this catastrophe have been the dividing line, erasing not only ecosystems, but also any trace of civilizations that might once have lived there? The possibility unsettles because it merges natural catastrophe with human myth. Across cultures, stories tell of floods, fires, and sudden destructions. In Mesopotamian epics, waters rise to swallow the world. In Greek myth, fire and deluge cleanse the earth. Indigenous traditions from the Americas to Oceania echo tales of skies that burned or seas that consumed. These accounts are scattered, fragmented, often dismissed as allegory. But if Antarctica does hold the scar of a massive impact, then the myths of sudden cataclysm may be more than imagination. They may be echoes of trauma carried forward through time. The circular anomaly of Wilkes Land is not the only one. Satellite scans have revealed other peculiar features: rectangular ridges, hexagonal structures, and unusual patterns beneath the snow. Each has drawn debate. Each has been framed as natural, yet the suspicion persists. The human mind is not content with randomness when order appears, and the eye cannot help but see design where lines run too straight, too sharp, as though they were once walls, avenues, or foundations of a city swallowed whole. Meanwhile, scientists exploring Antarctica's geology confront questions that resist resolution. Beneath the ice sheet lies the Gumburtsev Mountains, a hidden range comparable in size to the European Alps, discovered only in the late 1950s. Their peaks remain sharp, their valleys preserved despite millions of years of supposed burial. How can such features survive the relentless grinding of glaciers? Some suggest they were sealed quickly, entombed in a sudden freezing that locked them away before erosion could wear them down. The notion feeds into a darker possibility: that Antarctica's glaciation was not a slow, gradual process, but a sudden catastrophe, a rapid burial of landscapes, rivers, forests, and perhaps more. If the land froze quickly, what might have been caught in that freeze? Even the ice itself raises questions. In places, radar reveals voids, hollow spaces beneath the surface where heat from the Earth or trapped geothermal vents create caverns large enough to dwarf skyscrapers. Some of these ice caverns connect to subglacial lakes. Others stretch as labyrinths of tunnels warmed just enough to keep them from collapse. The knowledge that such caverns exist fuels the imagination. Could they serve as natural vaults, places where evidence of past life, or even human structures, might survive untouched? The thought is not so easily dismissed when one remembers how often human history has been recovered from caves, paintings on stone walls, bones preserved in darkness, artifacts sheltered from the sun. Antarctica may be the most extreme cave of all, its treasures hidden on a continental scale. The enigma is amplified by secrecy. Time and again, projects in Antarctica have been shrouded in controlled access, delayed publications, or fragmentary reports. Satellite images appear blurred or censored, expeditions report anomalies without detail, and military presence hovers at the edges of exploration despite official bans. Governments insist on the narrative of science, of environmental preservation. Yet the weight of control itself becomes suspicious. If Antarctica were only ice, why guard it so tightly? Why keep so much of it unseen? The question grows heavier when viewed through the pattern of history. Again and again, ruins once dismissed as myth have emerged into light. The walls of Troy, the drowned city of Heraklion off Egypt's coast, the massive earthworks in the Amazon basin, all once ridiculed, now undeniable. Each discovery reminds us that the silence of absence is not proof. Each discovery warns us that what we call impossible may only be hidden. In this context, Antarctica feels less like an exception and more like the next chapter waiting to be revealed. The possibility of buried ruins beneath Antarctica is more than archaeology. it is philosophy. It forces us to ask how fragile memory is, how easily civilizations vanish, and how little of human story we truly know. If a culture once stood there, then its burial is the most complete erasure imaginable, a silence enforced not by human conquest, but by nature itself. And if nothing lies there but stone and ice, then the enigma remains just as haunting, for it still embodies the possibility of loss, the reminder that even a continent can vanish from history's record. What unsettles most is not certainty, but ambiguity. The evidence remains fractured, maps too accurate to ignore, anomalies too strange to dismiss, myths too consistent to forget, yet never a single piece conclusive. Antarctica sits at the crossroads of science and speculation, geology and myth, silence and imagination. It demands patience, yet it tempts impatience. It asks us to wait, even as it whispers that what we wait for may change everything. And so the continent remains sealed, its surface gleaming under auroras and endless winds, its depths locked away. Beneath, something waits, whether stone or ruin, whether memory or myth. Humanity presses closer with satellites, drills, and restless questions, but the ice holds steady, unmoved, unwilling to yield. The snow falls, the silence thickens, and the riddle of Antarctica deepens with every passing year. To follow the thread of Antarctica's hidden past is to wander deeper into a labyrinth of suggestion, where each discovery opens another door to silence. The continent itself resists simplicity. Beneath its surface, layers of ice stretch back nearly 2 million years, yet within those layers lie signs of sudden change. Periods where climates shifted abruptly, where temperatures swung in ways difficult to reconcile with slow, natural cycles alone. These abrupt transitions invite uneasy speculation. Could such events have been triggered by impacts, eruptions, or forces we scarcely comprehend? And if landscapes once free of ice became buried in mere centuries, what remnants of life, even human life, could have been entombed before the snow settled permanently? The story of sudden freezing is not merely hypothetical. In Siberia, carcasses of mammoths have been unearthed, preserved in permafrost so perfectly that undigested food remained in their stomachs. Such preservation suggests not a gradual decline, but a rapid catastrophe, a sudden wave of cold that overtook living creatures in moments. If such a fate could befall beasts of the north, might entire regions of Antarctica have been locked in the same swift grasp, capturing more than animals? Could a civilization, if it existed there, have been encased in a single violent instant, preserved but hidden, like insects in amber? This idea haunts not only science but myth. Legends across the globe speak of worlds turned to stone, of lands frozen, of peoples cast into silence by a sudden curse. The Norse told of Fimbulwinter, a great freeze that signaled the end of ages. Ancient South American tales describe lands of eternal ice that swallowed whole tribes. Even in Hindu texts, there are references to realms of the far south, places shrouded in cold where memory itself seemed trapped. While none of these stories point directly to Antarctica, the resonance is unsettling. Myths echo truths we struggle to articulate, their imagery carrying fragments of memory too deep for ordinary history. Modern discoveries have only sharpened the unease. In 2017, satellite scans and radar imaging revealed a sprawling anomaly beneath the ice near Wilkes Land, described by some as a vast, buried structure, by others as nothing more than an unusual formation. Its scale, however, was staggering. Hundreds of kilometers across, with features too symmetrical for comfort. While official voices spoke cautiously of geology, speculation ignited quickly. Was this another crater from a cosmic impact, or something constructed, hidden in plain sight by the passage of time and the relentless weight of snow? Without excavation, the question remains unanswerable. Yet the very existence of such anomalies keeps alive the suspicion that Antarctica is not only a wilderness, but a vault. The vault imagery grows more pressing when considering the magnetic anomalies detected in several Antarctic regions. Instruments measuring the Earth's magnetic field have registered disruptions, zones where readings spike or falter unexpectedly. These could be linked to natural geology, to iron-rich formations or deep faults. Yet in the silence of speculation, such anomalies become suggestive of something more. Massive structures buried deep, emitting signatures unlike ordinary stone. Science offers cautious answers, imagination supplies the rest, and once again, the silence of Antarctica refuses resolution. The secrecy surrounding research only thickens the mystery. Reports occasionally surface of scientists discouraged from publishing unusual findings, of expeditions cut short, of data classified under the guise of national security. Such stories are difficult to verify, yet their persistence reveals something important. Antarctica has become a screen onto which humanity projects its deepest fears of concealment and control. In a world where so much information flows freely, the idea that an entire continent remains restricted, locked down by treaty, and guarded by the few nations with resources to reach it, only amplifies the sense that something is being withheld. The Antarctic Treaty itself stands as both protection and barrier. By freezing territorial claims and forbidding exploitation, it ensures that no single nation dominates the continent. Yet it also means that the land remains sealed, its depths unmined, its secrets unrevealed. To the cautious, this is wisdom. To the suspicious, it is collusion. Why should a world so ravenous for resources, so eager to divide every other corner of the Earth, suddenly agree to leave Antarctica untouched? The silence of that agreement echoes just as powerfully as the silence of the ice itself. And beneath it all, the landscape waits. The mountains of Gamburtsev, hidden yet intact. The lakes sealed in darkness, where organisms may live unseen by the sun. The valleys carved by rivers long gone, their channels locked beneath miles of ice. Every piece of evidence suggests that Antarctica is more than frozen wilderness. It is a palimpsest, a layered record of time where each stratum hides the traces of a world before. If civilizations once walked there, their traces would not erode or crumble. They would lie in perfect stillness, waiting. The thought is overwhelming because it reframes history not as a line but as a circle. Civilizations rise, fall, and vanish, their memory erased not by neglect alone but by catastrophe, flood, fire, ice. Each myth of lost continents becomes less fanciful in this light. Perhaps Atlantis is not one story, but many, a symbolic memory of all civilizations erased by nature's indifference. Antarctica, in this frame, is Atlantis made real, a continent swallowed not by waves but by frost. Yet the silence lingers unresolved. There is no proof, no artifact displayed in a museum, no stone lifted from the ice to speak for itself, only hints, anomalies, maps that should not exist, myths that refuse to die. And so Antarctica becomes not only a place but a question, a mirror for our own uncertainty. What else has been buried? What else has been forgotten? And if entire continents can vanish from memory, how fragile is the story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we came from? The ice does not reply. It keeps its vigil, gleaming beneath auroras, shifting and creaking under its own vast weight, holding within it secrets we may never uncover. Yet even in its silence, it speaks, not in answers, but in questions that linger, in shadows that deepen, in mysteries that remind us how little we know. The snow falls endlessly, and the world waits. Antarctica's silence is not only a matter of ice and wind, it is also a matter of absence in our collective story. History books treat the continent as though it has always been barren, a wasteland too remote to matter. Yet its very omission feels like a clue. A landmass larger than Europe, shrouded and ignored, exists at the edge of human imagination. How is it that such a vast space holds no place in the tales of early exploration, no clear role in myth except as a shadow? Perhaps its silence is deliberate, not in the sense of conspiracy, but in the deeper sense that some truths are simply buried until they are ready to surface. In the 18th and 19th centuries, explorers began to sketch the outlines of the southern continent with greater certainty. James Cook, in his voyages of the 1770s, skirted the Antarctic Circle but never saw the mainland itself. He spoke of endless fields of ice, seas choked with frozen slabs, horizons haunted by fog. His journals reveal awe and unease in equal measure, as though he sensed that Antarctica was not merely land, but a presence, a vast stillness capable of swallowing ships and men alike. Cook doubted that any fertile land lay within, dismissing the southern reaches as uninhabitable. Yet his very failure to pierce its interior left space for imagination. What was unseen became a canvas for speculation, and Antarctica's myth grew deeper. When the first confirmed sighting of the continent came in 1820, it carried none of the grandeur that myth had prepared. Russian, British, and American expeditions each claimed the discovery within days of each other, their journals filled with accounts of cliffs of ice and storms that defied progress. The explorers saw nothing but desolation. And yet, just beneath that surface, radar tells us today, lie mountains and valleys carved as though they were the skeleton of a hidden world. How strange it is to imagine that the first human eyes to glimpse Antarctica saw only death, when beneath their vision lay landscapes preserved in silence. If their ships had been able to cut through more than ice, what might they have found? The 19th century also witnessed a growing fascination with the idea of lost continents. Geologists and scholars debated the possibility of vanished landmasses to explain the distribution of fossils, species, and cultures. Lemuria was proposed as a sunken continent in the Indian Ocean. Atlantis was revived in endless essays and lectures. Antarctica, vast and unseen, slipped easily into this category. Some imagined it as the true Atlantis, others as the home of prehistoric peoples who migrated northward when the ice advanced. Writers filled the gaps of knowledge with visions of hidden kingdoms, drawing upon ancient myths that spoke of lands erased by catastrophe. Though science dismissed such theories, they reflected a human intuition, that Antarctica's emptiness was not natural, that something must lie beneath its silence. Even science itself, cautious and skeptical, has at times fed the mystery. In the late 19th century, when geologists first began piecing together the theory of continental drift, Antarctica played a quiet but crucial role. Fossils of Glossopteris, a prehistoric fern, were found in its rock, proving that the land had once been fertile, linked to other continents in the supercontinent Gondwana. If it had once been green, might it not also have once been habitable? The fossils of reptiles, freshwater creatures, and ancient plants tell us that life thrived there. But science leaves a chasm. It insists that this fertility was millions of years before humans. Yet in that silence between what is proven and what is imagined, suspicion thrives. Could there have been windows of warmth far later? Brief periods when human eyes could have witnessed what lay there? The human imagination clings to this gap. It does so not out of fantasy alone, but because history itself has shown how wrong certainty can be. Time and again, ruins have surfaced where none were expected. Stone circles in Britain, pyramids beneath the jungle, entire cities hidden under volcanic ash, all once denied, all now undeniable. Each revelation carries the same lesson. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and when applied to Antarctica, this lesson becomes heavy with implication. The early 20th century brought Antarctica into sharper focus. Expeditions led by Shackleton, Amundsen, and Scott pushed into its depths, enduring unimaginable hardship. They spoke of mountains piercing the clouds, of glaciers endless in their expanse, of horizons that shimmered with mirages. Their journeys revealed courage, but they revealed little of what lies beneath. Instead, their stories added to the continent's aura, a place that resists intrusion, that punishes those who try to uncover it, that guards its silence with cold. The deaths of explorers frozen in their tents became part of the myth, as though Antarctica itself demanded secrecy. Meanwhile, advances in technology revealed more of what the naked eye could not see. Aerial surveys during the mid-20th century revealed shapes in the snow, ridges and depressions that to some appeared artificial. Radar penetrated the ice to reveal hidden mountains, rivers, and possible structures. Each revelation seemed to whisper the same thing, that beneath the desolation, there is a hidden world. The official response was geology, always geology, and perhaps geology is enough. Yet the mind resists. It asks, why do these features resemble walls, doors, or cities? Why do the shapes repeat? Why does the ice, in its chaos, seem to imitate design? To stand at the edge of Antarctica is to stand at the edge of certainty. Beyond the ice lies possibility, and beyond possibility lies fear. If ruins do exist beneath the frozen crust, they would rewrite history as we know it. They would suggest that civilizations far older than Egypt, Sumer, or Mesopotamia once thrived, only to vanish in a catastrophe so complete that even memory could not escape. If nothing lies beneath, then the mystery remains in the ice itself, in the unsettling truth that entire continents can disappear from human knowledge for centuries. Either way, Antarctica undermines the neatness of our story, and perhaps that is its true power. It reminds us that history is fragile, that silence is stronger than memory, that entire chapters can vanish while the world continues on. In that sense, Antarctica is not merely ice. It is a metaphor for what we have lost, for what we have forgotten, for what may yet be waiting to return. The snow covers everything. The silence endures. And the question grows sharper, cutting deeper into the frozen heart of the world. The deeper one looks into the record of Antarctica, the more it feels like a riddle carved into the very skin of the earth. Its silence is not empty, but heavy, pressing against us with hints of what may have been erased. And as science pushes further, peeling back the veil of ice with radar, satellites, and seismic readings, the weight of its mystery only deepens. For beneath the desolate surface, beneath the storms and glaciers, lie landscapes that seem too deliberate, too ordered, to fit neatly into the comfort of geology alone. One of the most striking revelations of modern surveys is the discovery of subglacial valleys stretching for hundreds of miles. The Bentley Subglacial Trench, deeper than the Grand Canyon, lies buried in perpetual night, a chasm carved long before human eyes could imagine it. Yet within its vastness, patterns appear, ridges that run straight as if drawn by design, slopes that seem carved with intention. To geologists, these are natural, the scars of tectonic movement and ancient rivers. To others, they provoke a darker wonder. What if these valleys once housed rivers that flowed through a civilization's heart, their courses lined with settlements now sealed in a tomb of ice? The thought lingers, unprovable but persistent, gnawing at the edges of certainty. Elsewhere, radar has revealed formations under the ice that bear geometric patterns. In some sectors of East Antarctica, grids and rectangles appear in scans, their lines sharp enough to stir unease. Official voices insist they are artifacts of data processing, glitches in the translation from machine to image. But the human mind resists such simplicity. We are drawn to order, to symmetry, to the possibility that what we see is not error but memory, an echo of something real disguised by the screen of ice. And even if the scientists are correct, even if these shapes are nothing more than illusions, the fact that they resemble ruins so closely keeps the speculation alive. The burden of proof lies with silence, and silence is harder to break than stone. Yet what unsettles most is not only what radar reveals, but what it suggests we have yet to uncover. Beneath Antarctica lie more than 400 subglacial lakes, each sealed off from the surface for millennia, each a potential capsule of time. Some are immense, like Lake Vostok, rivaling the size of Lake Ontario, while others are small, scattered like hidden gems beneath the frost. What might dwell within these isolated waters? Microbes, yes, but perhaps more, perhaps echoes of ancient ecosystems preserved whole. And if nature can preserve life in such stillness, might it not also preserve evidence of those who once walked there? The possibility is tantalizing, not because it is proven, but because it cannot yet be disproven. These scientific revelations do not exist in a vacuum. They fall into a field already thick with myth and speculation. Stories of lost continents, of vanished civilizations, of knowledge buried beyond recall, find fertile ground in Antarctica's silence. Plato's Atlantis, swallowed by the sea. Hyperborea, hidden beyond impassable ice. Lemuria, erased by tectonic shifts. Each myth may have its own geography, its own logic, yet all converge on a single theme. The Earth hides its past, and we are left with fragments. Antarctica becomes the stage upon which these myths converge, a real place that mirrors the dream of hidden worlds. And history itself provides examples of rediscovery that blur the line between myth and reality. Troy was thought a fantasy until Schliemann's spade unearthed its walls. The city of Herakleion lay drowned for centuries before divers revealed its temples beneath the Nile Delta. The jungles of Guatemala and Cambodia concealed entire empires, dismissed as legends until technology revealed their scope. Time and again, what was ridiculed as myth has been reborn as fact. In this context, Antarctica becomes not merely speculation, but a continuation of a pattern, a reminder that silence is not final, that absence is not the same as non-existence. What makes Antarctica unique, however, is its perfect seal. While deserts, seas, and jungles erode or consume ruins, ice preserves. It buries without destroying, entombs without decay. If a civilization once stood there, its stones may yet stand, untouched beneath their frozen cover. The idea is haunting because it suggests a kind of suspended animation, a ghost of the past still waiting, silent but intact. Unlike Troy or Angkor, its rediscovery would not be partial or broken, but pristine, a civilization frozen in time. That possibility electrifies the imagination, for it suggests that beneath Antarctica's silence lies not only memory, but resurrection. The political dimension adds another layer of unease. Research in Antarctica remains tightly controlled, monitored, and restricted by international treaties. On the surface, this is framed as environmental stewardship, a way to protect the continent from exploitation. But the strictness of access, the secrecy surrounding certain projects, the sudden disappearance of anomalies from public satellite databases, all these details feed the suspicion that more is known than is revealed. History shows that when power converges upon secrecy, silence itself becomes evidence of concealment. Whether what is concealed is extraordinary or mundane almost does not matter. The result is the same. Speculation thrives where truth is withheld. The thought that presses hardest is this: if something is indeed buried beneath the ice, what would its revelation mean? It would not merely be another archaeological find, another ruin to add to the catalogue of human history. It would be a rewriting, a rupture, a tearing open of the linear story we have constructed. It would mean that civilizations older than any we know once thrived, that memory is cyclical, that humanity is not the first to walk the path of knowledge and loss. It would mean that history itself has been buried, and that we live not at the dawn of human story, but at its midpoint, one cycle among many. Yet even if the ice conceals nothing but stone and water, the lesson remains no less profound. For it reminds us that our knowledge is fragile, that the earth itself withholds secrets, that silence is as much a part of history as memory. Antarctica becomes both the question and the answer, both the evidence and the absence. It forces us to confront the limits of what we can know, and in doing so, it draws us closer to the truth, not of what lies beneath, but of how much remains hidden in plain sight. The snow drifts on, erasing every trace of those who dare to cross its surface. The wind howls, carrying no answers, only the echo of questions too vast for certainty. And beneath it all, in silence unbroken, the continent waits. The mystery of Antarctica cannot be separated from the question of memory. What humanity chooses to remember, and what it forgets. Our species has walked the earth for hundreds of thousands of years, yet most of our written history spans only a fraction of that time. Entire ages lie in shadow, reduced to fragments of pottery, bones and myths told in whispers across generations. Against this backdrop, Antarctica looms like the ultimate test of memory. If a landmass larger than Europe could vanish from our story, buried beneath ice, then what else might have been lost to silence? The idea of catastrophic erasure is not foreign to archaeology. Throughout history, civilizations have disappeared not gradually but suddenly, as though swallowed by the earth itself. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius preserved Pompeii in a single day, freezing lives in mid-motion. Floods swept away entire river valleys, leaving behind only silt and legend. The fall of empires like the Maya or the Indus Valley left ruins whose silence baffles us even today. We know civilizations can vanish, their memory fragmented or denied. So why should it seem impossible that Antarctica, sealed beneath ice, might also conceal traces of a world erased in a single act of nature? The ice itself is both prison and guardian. It buries landscapes beneath crushing weight, but it also preserves them in stillness. Where deserts erode and jungles consume, ice seals and suspends. This dual role makes Antarctica the most haunting of archives. If anything was once built there, monuments, cities, even the simplest of structures, the possibility exists that they remain intact, frozen in time. We cannot yet reach them, but their silence presses against the edges of imagination. The continent becomes a paradox, a wasteland above, yet potentially the most perfect museum beneath. This paradox has inspired generations of thinkers, from scientists to mystics. In the early 20th century, esoteric writers seized upon Antarctica as a possible cradle of forgotten civilizations. Helena Blavatsky and her followers speculated about ancient continents swallowed by ice, linking Antarctica to the idea of hidden masters and lost wisdom. Later, during the interwar years, the notion of an Antarctic Atlantis took root in fringe literature, suggesting that the frozen land might hold ruins older than Egypt or Mesopotamia. Though mainstream historians rejected these claims, the persistence of such theories reveals a deep unease, that the official story of humanity feels incomplete, that the silences in our past are too large to ignore. Even modern science, cautious and empirical, has uncovered anomalies that feed this unease. Ice-penetrating radar has revealed subglacial mountain ranges, valleys, and possible cavities vast enough to house entire cities. Satellite images have at times shown curious formations, rectangular ridges, geometric patterns, that to some eyes suggest architecture rather than geology. Each time, official explanations lean toward natural causes, glacial movements, volcanic activity, data distortions. Yet the resemblance to human design remains uncanny, and once the mind sees order in chaos, it cannot unsee it. The possibility of ruins, however unlikely, refuses to vanish. What heightens the mystery is not just the anomalies themselves, but the way information about them is controlled. Researchers working in Antarctica operate under strict international treaties, their findings filtered through committees and agencies. Reports are often delayed, limited, or reduced to vague summaries. Satellite imagery is sometimes blurred or removed from public access. These measures may be justified as environmental or security precautions, but they also fuel suspicion. Secrecy, intentional or not, becomes part of the mystery. When a place as vast as Antarctica is guarded so closely, imagination fills the silence with possibilities too heavy to dismiss. The political dimension cannot be ignored. During the Cold War, Antarctica was a point of interest for both the United States and the Soviet Union. Expeditions were launched under the banners of science, yet the scale of the operations hinted at deeper motives. Military presence was officially banned, but bases proliferated. Nuclear-powered stations were built, research extended beneath the ice, and certain areas became restricted zones. The Antarctic Treaty froze territorial claims, but it also ensured that control over the continent remained in the hands of a few. Was this merely geopolitics, or was something discovered that demanded such secrecy? The question lingers, unanswered. Meanwhile, myths continue to echo against the walls of silence. The ancient Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, a land beyond the north winds, a paradise hidden in perpetual light. Some writers have connected this myth not to the Arctic, but to Antarctica, imagining that the inversion of memory turned the southern land into the northern myth. Similarly, indigenous traditions from South America describe frozen realms at the edge of the world, places where ancestral spirits dwell. These tales may be allegorical, but their persistence across cultures suggests that humanity has always carried an intuition of hidden lands, preserved yet unreachable. And perhaps that is why Antarctica unsettles us so deeply. It is not only about what may be buried, but about what its silence represents. It stands as proof that the Earth itself is capable of hiding truths from us, that entire continents can vanish from human knowledge without trace. It forces us to admit that history is not as complete as we pretend. Each layer of ice is a reminder of memory's fragility, of how quickly civilizations can be erased, of how easily silence triumphs over story. If one day the ice were to melt, revealing ruins beneath, the impact would not be limited to archaeology. It would shake the foundations of identity, religion, politics, and science. It would force us to reconsider the linear progression we tell ourselves about human development. It would suggest that history is cyclical, that we are not the first to rise, nor will we be the last to fall. And it would leave us with the most haunting question of all. How many times has this happened before? For now the ice keeps its secrets. Satellites scan, drills probe, scientists speculate, and writers imagine. Yet the continent itself remains silent, indifferent, its treasures locked away, whether it conceals nothing but stone or the ruins of a forgotten civilization. Antarctica teaches us the same lesson. Silence is part of history. What is absent can be as telling as what is remembered. The auroras shimmer above the endless snow, painting the night with fleeting colors. The wind moans across the ice, carrying no answers, only the echo of questions too vast for certainty. And in that silence, the riddle of Antarctica deepens, layer upon layer, as though history itself has been entombed in white. To look at Antarctica is to stare into the perfect metaphor of erasure. The white sheet that covers it hides not only stone and water, but the possibility of memory itself. Unlike deserts or jungles, which consume ruins through time, the Antarctic ice smothers without destroying, preserving in silence. If there was ever a chapter of human history that has been sealed away, it is here, under this frozen shroud. And the more closely one studies the continent, the more it feels like a place where myth and science meet, not in contradiction, but in uneasy alignment. Consider the strange convergence of global myths that speak of lands destroyed or hidden. From Plato's Atlantis to the Polynesian tales of sunken homelands, from Norse sagas of Fimbul winter to the Andean stories of frozen realms, cultures separated by oceans and millennia all carry stories of places lost to catastrophe. These are often dismissed as allegory, but they may represent a collective memory of cycles of destruction, floods, quakes, fires, and perhaps ice. Could Antarctica itself be one of these hidden lands, its memory scattered into myth, surviving in fragments that later cultures reimagined in symbolic form? The thought lingers, unnerving not because it is proven, but because it cannot be silenced. In the mid-20th century, scientific advances began peeling back Antarctica's mask with unprecedented clarity. Aerial surveys revealed vast mountain ranges, their peaks piercing the ice like the spines of a sleeping giant. Radar imaging uncovered valleys, rivers, and possible structures, features buried so deep that they had not seen sunlight for millions of years. Each discovery, though framed in geological terms, deepened the suspicion that Antarctica might be more than wilderness. If mountains the size of the Alps could remain hidden, what else might lie beneath? The absence of answers is itself haunting. The political atmosphere of the same era only fed this unease. Operation Highjump, conducted by the United States Navy in 1946-47, remains one of the most mysterious undertakings in polar history. Officially described as a training exercise and scientific mission, it deployed 13 ships, dozens of aircraft, and thousands of men. Yet the operation ended abruptly after only a few months, with vague explanations citing weather and logistical challenges. Admiral Richard Byrd, who led the mission, made cryptic remarks afterward about threats that could strike with incredible speed from polar regions. His words, stripped of context, have fueled speculation for decades. Was he speaking metaphorically, or had the expedition encountered something unexpected, something that demanded silence? The secrecy surrounding Antarctica deepened further with the signing of the Antarctic Treaty in 1959. On its surface, the treaty was an extraordinary act of global unity, preserving the continent for peaceful scientific use and forbidding military activity. Yet the very speed with which nations agreed to lock away such a vast territory raises questions. The world rarely surrenders land or resources without conflict, and yet here was an entire continent set aside, sealed from exploitation. The official reason is noble, to preserve the last great wilderness. But the suspicion remains. Was there another reason, one too extraordinary to disclose? In this atmosphere of secrecy, even scientific findings acquire an air of unease. Reports of magnetic anomalies in Wilkes Land, vast enough to suggest hidden structures or even impact craters, are quietly folded into technical language. Drilling into Lake Vostok, one of the world's largest subglacial lakes, has yielded samples containing strange microbial DNA. Official explanations speak of extremophiles, organisms adapted to darkness and pressure. Yet rumors persist that findings were more unusual than reported, that genetic sequences did not align with known life. Whether exaggeration or truth, the silence around such discoveries invites suspicion. What is left unsaid always speaks louder than what is revealed. The resonance of myth with anomaly is difficult to ignore. If global stories of lost continents are symbolic memories of real catastrophes, then Antarctica may be their physical manifestation, a land preserved, erased, and hidden at once. Some see in it the true Atlantis. Others imagine Hyperborea inverted, turned from paradise into tomb. Still others whisper of civilizations erased by sudden glaciation, their knowledge entombed. The mind resists certainty, but cannot dismiss the parallels. The deeper question is what revelation would mean. If ruins were found beneath the ice, it would not simply adjust the margins of history, it would rupture them. Our narrative of human progress, from primitive beginnings to modern states, depends on continuity. To find evidence of an older civilization beneath Antarctica would imply discontinuity, cycles of rise and fall far beyond what textbooks allow. It would suggest that humanity is not at its first ascent, but one of many, and that our memory of the past is smaller, more fragile than we admit. Even if the ice conceals nothing but stone, the silence itself remains powerful. For Antarctica proves that the Earth is capable of erasing memory on a continental scale. It demonstrates that entire lands can vanish from human story, not through conspiracy alone, but through nature's indifference. And in that erasure lies the most haunting truth of all. History is not only what we remember, but also what we have lost, buried in silence too deep for easy retrieval. The auroras that dance across Antarctic skies seem almost like a mocking answer. Light upon light, beauty upon emptiness, a reminder that the continent gives us nothing but questions. And as the snow drifts endlessly, covering every trace of passage, we are left to wonder whether what lies beneath is merely geology or the ruins of a forgotten age. The ice does not reply. It watches, it preserves, it waits. Antarctica, in its immensity, is not only a frontier of science, but a frontier of imagination. To stand before its endless white expanse is to feel both the presence of the Earth's oldest silence and the weight of questions that have lingered for centuries. What makes the enigma so powerful is that it lies precisely between certainty and speculation. Science confirms that beneath the ice there are valleys, mountains, and lakes. But what science cannot yet reveal is whether those landscapes hold traces of something more, something that may change how we understand our past. In that gap, speculation thrives, and myths take root like shadows beneath auroras. The human mind is restless in the face of voids. When knowledge falters, imagination fills the space. Antarctica is one of the last true voids, a place where even satellites and sensors cannot fully penetrate the miles of frozen cover. Perhaps that is why so many stories, rumors, and theories cling to its silence. Some insist the continent is nothing but geology, a blank wilderness devoid of history. Yet others whisper of ancient civilizations, of ruins preserved by ice, of cataclysms that buried memory itself. The truth remains locked away, but the silence keeps both possibilities alive. Consider the rumors that have trailed 20th century expeditions. Some explorers reported finding vast caverns warmed by geothermal heat, large enough to hold entire lakes and ecosystems beneath the ice. If such spaces exist, they would be shielded from the crushing cold above, providing pockets where life could survive or be preserved. Modern science confirms that geothermal activity does warm parts of the Antarctic bedrock, creating subglacial lakes and tunnels. Whether these chambers hold only water and stone, or something more, is a question that no one can yet answer. But the possibility of hidden vaults beneath the ice feeds the imagination of those who believe that memory itself is sealed there. The story of Antarctica is also entangled with secrecy. Military and scientific expeditions have often reported anomalies, only for details to be lost, redacted, or withheld. Satellite images have revealed curious formations that resemble walls or structures, only for those same images to later vanish from public access. Official explanations speak of errors, distortions, or natural features mistaken for design. Yet the persistence of these patterns, grids, ridges, rectangular shapes, remains difficult to dismiss entirely. To some, they are nothing but illusions. To others, they are glimpses through a crack in the silence, fragments of a truth not yet ready to surface. History offers reminders that such cracks can become revelations. The rediscovery of Troy, long dismissed as legend, forced scholars to confront the fragility of certainty. The drowned city of Heracleion, once thought myth, emerged from the Nile Delta with temples and statues intact. The jungles of Cambodia and Guatemala revealed entire metropolises long hidden beneath vegetation. Each of these cases teaches the same lesson. What is dismissed as fantasy may yet lie beneath the surface, waiting for the right eyes, the right tools, the right moment. If this is true of deserts and seas, why not of ice? And so, Antarctica becomes more than a land. It becomes a question about the nature of history itself. Are we truly the first civilization to rise to this level of knowledge? Or are we only the latest in a cycle of growth and erasure? Myths of Atlantis, Hyperborea, and other lost lands suggest a collective memory of civilizations destroyed by catastrophe. Whether or not they reference Antarctica directly, they echo the same pattern. Humanity rises, thrives, and is then reduced to silence, leaving only fragments in story and stone. If Antarctica conceals ruins beneath its glaciers, then it is not only a physical discovery, but a philosophical one, proof that our memory is cyclical, fragile, and incomplete. The silence of the continent also raises unsettling questions about what we are not told. International treaties limit access, research is closely controlled, and findings are often published only in fragments. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 is celebrated as an achievement of peace, but it also functions as a lock. It ensures that the continent remains sealed, its depths unexplored by corporations, militaries, or independent voices. Some argue this is wise, a safeguard for one of the last untouched places on Earth. But others suspect that such control exists because something extraordinary is hidden there, something that, if revealed, would alter the way we see ourselves. In the absence of proof, we are left with fragments. Maps like the Piri Reis and Oronteus Finaeus charts, which depict coastlines resembling Antarctica without ice. Anomalies in radar scans that suggest geometry beneath glaciers. Fossils of plants and reptiles that remind us of a fertile Antarctica long before the ice. Myths that echo tales of lost lands. None of these fragments are conclusive alone, but together they form a mosaic too compelling to ignore. It is in these fragments that speculation finds its foothold, where silence becomes louder than certainty. And yet, the most haunting element is not proof, but ambiguity. Antarctica forces us to confront how much of history may lie beyond our grasp. Even if no ruins exist beneath the ice, the fact that such a vast landmass can vanish from memory at all is a revelation. It proves that history is not fixed, but fragile, that what we know is only a sliver of what once was. If Antarctica is empty of civilization, then it still teaches us the humbling truth that nature can erase memory so completely that even continents can disappear from the human story. The auroras still dance across its skies, illuminating ice that has not yielded for millions of years. The wind sweeps across the plains, erasing every trace of those who dare to cross its surface. Beneath it all, the continent holds steady, indifferent, silent. Whether it guards nothing but stone or the ruins of a forgotten age, it forces us to face the same conclusion. Silence is a part of history, as powerful and telling as any written word. And so, the riddle deepens. Antarctica remains the most enigmatic of continents, not because of what we know, but because of what we cannot. The snow falls endlessly, sealing the land tighter with every storm, and the questions wait beneath, untouched, unresolved, as though time itself has been buried in white. Antarctica's riddle does not exist in isolation. It is part of a larger pattern, a web of mysteries that stretch across the Earth, each pointing toward the same uncomfortable truth. Our history is incomplete. When one compares the silence of the ice to other enigmas scattered across the globe, the parallels are difficult to ignore. Ancient maps, lost cities, megaliths that defy easy explanation, all of them whisper that the story we tell ourselves is not the whole story. Antarctica, in this context, is not only a frozen land, but a mirror reflecting those silences back to us, magnified on a continental scale. Consider the Piri Reis map again, not as an isolated anomaly, but as part of a tradition. Across centuries, cartographers preserved fragments of coastlines and islands no longer visible. The Cantino planisphere, the Oronteus Finaeus chart, and even early Renaissance globes hint at lands where none should be. Were these errors, inventions, or remnants of knowledge carried across time from sources long forgotten? The same question applies to Antarctica. Are the lines on ancient maps merely distorted guesses, or are they echoes of surveys from an age that predates our own memory? If it is the latter, then Antarctica becomes not only a question of geography, but a doorway into the possibility of civilizations lost to silence. Elsewhere on Earth, ruins have emerged from places once dismissed as barren. The Nazca lines, spread across Peru's desert, remained hidden until seen from the air, their massive designs invisible to those who walked the ground. The megaliths of Baalbek in Lebanon, with stones weighing hundreds of tons, have no clear explanation of how they were moved. The Great Pyramids themselves remain shrouded in mystery despite centuries of study. These monuments remind us that human capacity is deeper, stranger, and older than our records admit. If such anomalies stand in plain sight, how much easier would it be for evidence to vanish beneath 2 miles of ice? This sense of buried possibility becomes sharper when one considers the scale of natural catastrophes that have shaped the Earth. The Younger Dryas period, some 12,000 years ago, brought sudden, dramatic climate shifts. Evidence points to possible comet impacts or meltwater floods that transformed landscapes and erased entire ecosystems. Some researchers argue that these events may also have erased civilizations that once thrived along coastlines now drowned. If such destruction could strike so swiftly, it is not impossible that Antarctica, too, might have witnessed catastrophe. Forests frozen, rivers stilled, and perhaps traces of human settlement locked beneath ice in an instant. The myths of catastrophe align eerily with these scientific records. Plato's Atlantis, destroyed in a single night. Native American tales of floods that reshaped the land. Nordic myths of winters without end. Polynesian stories of islands swallowed by rising seas. While each story belongs to its culture, together they suggest that humanity has long carried the memory of loss, encoded in narrative because written record could not survive. Could Antarctica be the ultimate expression of such loss, the continent that proves myth and science converge? Yet science itself remains cautious, offering explanations rooted in geology. The Gamburtsev Mountains, discovered under the ice, are said to be relics of ancient tectonic collisions. The Wilkes Land anomaly, a massive circular feature detected by radar, is described as the scar of an asteroid impact. The rectangular ridges and geometric patterns glimpsed beneath the ice are explained as illusions, the chaotic outcome of natural processes. Perhaps all of this is true, but the tension lies not in what is proven, but in what is left unresolved. Science provides answers that explain the mechanics of what exists, but it cannot explain why these anomalies resemble memory, why mountains seem like architecture, why patterns echo design, why myths echo truth. The control of information adds to the unease. Reports of unusual findings are often delayed, restricted, or buried in technical language. Satellite images of Antarctic regions sometimes vanish from public archives. Research teams release cautious fragments, never the full story. Whether these are innocent measures or deliberate concealments, the effect is the same. The sense that Antarctica hides more than it reveals. And in that silence, the imagination is free to wander, to fill the gaps with visions of ruins, temples, or entire civilizations waiting in stillness beneath the frost. The significance of such speculation is not only archaeological, it is existential. If Antarctica does hold ruins of a forgotten civilization, it would mean that our species is older, more cyclical, and more fragile than we believe. It would mean that history is not a straight ascent from primitive to modern, but a spiral of rise and fall, each cycle erased by catastrophe. It would force us to reconsider not only our origins but our destiny. Are we too destined to be buried, our monuments forgotten, our memory erased, leaving only whispers for some future people to rediscover? Antarctica becomes a haunting reminder that nothing is permanent, that even continents can vanish into silence. And yet, if Antarctica holds no ruins, no evidence of past civilizations, the mystery does not disappear. For the very existence of such a continent, concealed and forgotten, remains profound. It proves that the Earth itself is capable of erasing memory on a scale beyond comprehension. It demonstrates that history is not only about what we know, but also about what has been withheld by nature itself. In that sense, Antarctica is already the greatest monument to forgetting. It does not need ruins to teach us the lesson. It embodies the silence of history in its very form. The auroras above the continent shimmer like ghostly reminders, light dancing upon ice that refuses to yield. Each storm that sweeps across its surface erases human presence in ours, as though the land itself resists intrusion. And beneath it all, the landscapes wait. Whether they are only stone or something more, whether they are empty or filled with memory, Antarctica remains the same. A continent of silence, a vault of history, a mirror of what we cannot yet know. The snow falls, the silence endures, and the riddle deepens. The mystery of Antarctica grows heavier when considered alongside the question of power, who controls knowledge, and who decides what may be revealed. History is not only what is remembered, it is also what is hidden, shaped or erased by those with authority. Antarctica, in this sense, becomes more than a wilderness of ice. It becomes a stage where science, secrecy, and politics intersect, creating a silence that is as deliberate as it is natural. And it is this dual silence, one imposed by nature, the other by institutions, that feeds the unease surrounding the continent. Throughout the 20th century, Antarctica was not ignored. It was probed, mapped, and fought over quietly, even as official voices insisted it was a land of science alone. The Nazi expedition of 1938-1939, the American Operation Highjump of 1946-1947, the Soviet drilling into Lake Vostok in the latter half of the century. Each of these endeavors generated not only data, but also rumors. What were they searching for? What compelled nations to invest so heavily in a land that promised no easy wealth, no fertile ground, no cities to conquer? Whaling, minerals, and strategy explain part of it, but not all. The intensity of interest, followed by sudden silences and missing details, suggests that Antarctica offered something more, something never fully disclosed. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 stands as the most remarkable moment in this history. At the height of the Cold War, when nations fought proxy battles across the globe, rivals suddenly agreed to preserve an entire continent, forbidding military presence and suspending territorial claims. The treaty is praised as a triumph of cooperation. Yet it also reads like an act of containment, a decision to lock Antarctica away, to ensure that whatever it concealed remained beyond the reach of exploitation or exposure. Such unity, in a time of division, raises questions that have never been resolved. Was Antarctica sealed because it held nothing, or because it held too much? The restrictions extend beyond geopolitics into the realm of science itself. Research in Antarctica is tightly controlled, permits limited, and findings filtered through bureaucratic review. Independent exploration is nearly impossible. Satellite imagery, when it reveals anomalies, is sometimes blurred, censored, or dismissed as glitches. This may be coincidence, or it may be necessity, but the effect is the same. Antarctica remains beyond the reach of ordinary eyes. In a world where information flows ceaselessly, this silence is jarring, and it invites suspicion. The less we are told, the more we imagine. At the center of this suspicion lies the possibility of ruins. If civilizations once rose in Antarctica before the Great Freezing, their remains would lie preserved, waiting. And if such ruins were ever glimpsed, what would governments do? Would they reveal them, rewriting history for all humanity? Or would they conceal them, fearing the destabilization of politics, religion, and identity? The answer may already be clear. For the strongest evidence of concealment is not discovery itself, but silence, the refusal to address anomalies, the dismissal of inconvenient findings, the absence of proof where hints persist. Silence itself becomes the testimony of what cannot be spoken. But what kind of ruins, if they exist, might lie beneath? Temples carved into rock, cities aligned with stars, artifacts of a knowledge lost to time? The mind reaches for parallels. The megaliths of Baalbek, the pyramids of Giza, the stone heads of Easter Island, all monuments that defy simple explanation. If such wonders could stand in deserts and jungles, why not beneath ice? The difference is only that ice conceals more perfectly, locking its treasures away until chance or catastrophe reveals them. Unlike stone exposed to wind and rain, Antarctic ruins, if they exist, would remain pristine, their silence intact. The thought is both thrilling and terrifying. The terror lies in what their discovery would mean. It would not simply add to history, it would overturn it. To find ruins beneath Antarctica would be to prove that advanced civilizations existed far earlier than accepted timelines allow. It would mean that humanity is older, its story more fragmented, its memory more fragile. It would shatter the linear narrative of progress and replace it with a cyclical one, where civilizations rise and fall only to be erased by catastrophe. And if that is true, what does it say about us now? Are we too standing on the edge of erasure, destined to be buried by nature, our monuments forgotten, our stories sealed in silence for some future age to rediscover? Even if no ruins exist, Antarctica still forces us to confront the fragility of knowledge. The continent is proof that entire chapters can vanish, not because of malice, but because of nature's indifference. Ice erases as thoroughly as fire, though it does so without destruction. It smothers, seals, and waits. The absence of evidence beneath the ice does not make history safer. It makes it more precarious. For it shows how much can be hidden, how easily the earth itself can erase the trace of memory. The resonance of myth deepens this lesson. Atlantis, Hyperborea, Lemuria, each a story of land lost, of civilizations erased. These myths may not describe Antarctica directly, but they carry the same intuition: that human memory is incomplete, that the earth itself holds secrets too vast to ignore. To look upon Antarctica is to see the embodiment of these myths, a real land that confirms the possibility of silence on a scale beyond comprehension. And so, the continent remains what it has always been: a mirror. To scientists, it reflects geology and climate change. To politicians, it reflects strategy and secrecy. To dreamers, it reflects lost civilizations and forgotten wisdom. In truth, it may be all of these at once, for Antarctica is large enough to contain every projection, every fear, every dream. Its silence does not diminish its mystery, it magnifies it. The auroras shimmer across the polar sky, their colors flickering like ancient fire upon a frozen sea. The winds carve shapes into the snow, erasing them as quickly as they form. And beneath it all, the ice lies unbroken, keeping its vigil, indifferent to the questions pressed upon it. Whether it conceals nothing but stone or the ruins of a forgotten age, Antarctica remains what it has always been: a riddle written in white. The snow falls. The silence deepens, and the unanswered questions echo louder than any certainty. To speak of Antarctica is to speak of silence, but not all silences are the same. Some are born of absence, others of concealment. In the frozen continent, both silences converge, creating an unease that resonates beyond science or politics. It is not simply that the land is hidden. It is that what little has been glimpsed seems to hint at something more, something that refuses to be named. The continent becomes an enigma not because of what we know, but because of what remains just beyond reach, like a shadow glimpsed through frosted glass. The scientific narrative insists on geology. It speaks of tectonic plates, shifting ice, and climate cycles measured in millennia. Antarctica was once part of Gondwana, linked to Africa, India, and Australia. Its forests flourished in warm epochs, its rivers carried life, and its valleys opened wide beneath temperate skies. Fossils of leaves, trees, and reptiles prove that life thrived there. But science insists these ages belong to a past long before humans. The conclusion is cautious, restrained. Whatever Antarctica once was, It has been locked in ice for tens of millions of years, far beyond the span of human memory. Yet the human mind resists this neat closure. For if forests grew there, if rivers once ran, who is to say that no one ever gazed upon those horizons? And if memory itself is fragile, could not fragments of such a land have survived, encoded in myth, in maps, in stories too strange to dismiss? It is this tension between certainty and doubt that keeps Antarctica alive in imagination. Consider the ancient maps again. The Piri Reis chart, the Oronteus Finaeus globe, fragments that depict coastlines beneath the ice. Scholars argue distortion, misinterpretation, coincidence. Yet coincidence, when repeated, begins to resemble pattern. And pattern, in the absence of proof, becomes suggestion. Were these maps relics of surveys conducted by forgotten hands, survivors of a civilization erased before memory began? Or are they nothing but mistakes magnified by longing? The answer is elusive, but the questions persist. Even modern exploration cannot resolve them. Satellite imaging reveals anomalies, grids, ridges, circular depressions that to some appear artificial. Radar uncovers mountain ranges hidden beneath glaciers, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, lakes sealed for millions of years. Each discovery confirms that Antarctica conceals landscapes beyond imagination, but each discovery also multiplies questions. If mountains of alpine scale can remain hidden until the 20th century, why not ruins? If valleys of impossible depth lie buried, why not remnants of cities? Silence breeds speculation, and speculation clings to every anomaly. The idea of catastrophe deepens this speculation. History is filled with stories of sudden destruction, of civilizations erased not slowly, but in a single stroke. The Younger Dryas cooling, floods at the end of the Ice Age, volcanic eruptions, impacts from comets or asteroids, all have left scars on Earth and memory alike. What if Antarctica's great freezing was not gradual, but sudden, a cataclysm that buried landscapes intact? The notion may be unsettling, but examples like the frozen mammoths of Siberia remind us that such preservation is possible. Entire animals, with food still in their mouths, were locked in ice in moments. If such a fate could befall beasts, why not structures, or even civilizations? The possibility refuses dismissal. Yet perhaps the greatest unease lies not in what is hidden, but in how it is guarded. Research in Antarctica is among the most restricted in the world. Permits are tightly controlled, access limited, data filtered through agencies and treaties. Satellite images are sometimes blurred, anomalies dismissed as illusions, and independent exploration nearly impossible. This secrecy may be innocent, a safeguard for fragile environments, but it may also be deliberate, a quiet containment of truths deemed too disruptive to reveal. History is full of knowledge withheld, discoveries buried, texts suppressed, truths delayed until their power diminished. Why should Antarctica be different? The human longing for hidden truth ensures that Antarctica cannot be forgotten. It has become the canvas upon which we project both our fears and our hopes. Some imagine it as Atlantis reborn, the tomb of an ancient empire preserved in silence. Others see it as a cosmic scar, proof of catastrophes that shaped not only landscapes, but memory itself. Still others treat it as metaphor, the embodiment of history's silence, reminding us how much lies beyond our grasp. Each interpretation says as much about us as it does about the continent. Antarctica does not answer. It only reflects. The most haunting question is not whether ruins lie beneath the ice, but what their discovery would mean. If evidence of a lost civilization were found, it would overturn every certainty we hold about history. It would prove that humanity's story is not linear but cyclical, that knowledge rises and falls, leaving only fragments for future ages. It would force us to confront the possibility that we are not unique, that we are not the first to build, to rise, to be erased. The weight of such a revelation would be more than archaeological. It would be existential. It would shatter our sense of permanence, our illusion of progress, our fragile belief that we are the pinnacle of history. And if no ruins exist, if Antarctica holds only stone and ice, the lesson remains the same. For even in its emptiness, the continent proves how fragile memory is. It shows that the Earth itself can conceal truth so completely that even continents can vanish from human story. It teaches that silence is part of history, as powerful as any word or monument. And it reminds us that the greatest mysteries are not those solved by evidence, but those left unresolved, lingering like questions in the wind. The auroras ripple across the southern sky, shifting curtains of light that seem almost to mock our questions with beauty. The winds howl across glaciers, erasing every human trace in ours. Beneath it all, the ice holds steady, indifferent, unbroken. It does not reveal, it does not deny. It simply waits, timeless beyond our reach. And so Antarctica endures, not as an answer, but as a question. It reminds us that what is hidden may never be lost, and what is lost may one day be found. It is the silence beneath the silence, the echo of history buried in white. The snow continues to fall, sealing the land tighter, and the riddle deepens with every storm. Antarctica, in its vast indifference, remains the most perfect guardian of secrets. It does not resist with walls or weapons, but with silence so absolute that even the loudest questions vanish into the wind. And yet, the very weight of its silence has never stopped humanity from asking. If anything, the absence of answers has only drawn us deeper into speculation. For in Antarctica, the line between science and myth blurs, and each discovery seems to echo both reason and imagination at once. In the 21st century, new technologies have given us sharper eyes, tools that can pierce the ice with radar, sonar, and satellite imaging. These instruments reveal landscapes that might as well belong to another planet. Canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon snake across its bedrock. Rivers carved long before the glaciers swallowed them stretch unseen for hundreds of miles. Entire mountain ranges, the Gamburtsev, the Ellsworth, the Prince Charles, remain untouched by human feet, locked in a prison of ice for millions of years. What unsettles the mind is not only their presence, but their preservation. How could such sharp peaks and deep valleys remain unweathered? Some suggest they were entombed quickly, frozen in a sudden catastrophe that sealed them intact. If that is true, what else might have been sealed alongside them? The question grows darker when one recalls the Wilkes Land anomaly, a vast circular feature beneath the ice detected by satellites. Spanning hundreds of miles, its form resembles a crater or a buried dome. To geologists, it may be evidence of a colossal impact, perhaps even greater than the asteroid believed to have ended the age of dinosaurs. But to others, its symmetry hints at something more deliberate, an ancient structure, a vault, or even a forgotten city hidden beneath ice. No excavation has been possible, and so the anomaly remains locked in speculation. But its scale, its shape, its haunting presence beneath the frost make it one of the most compelling questions on the planet. Subglacial lakes deepen the mystery further. Lake Vostok, buried beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, is the largest and most famous. When Russian scientists drilled into its waters, they discovered microbial life forms unlike any seen before, organisms that had evolved in isolation for millions of years. Officially, these microbes prove only that life can survive extreme conditions. But in the shadows of speculation, some whisper of stranger findings withheld from the public. Genetic codes that do not align with known branches of evolution, or traces of more complex organisms lost to official reports. True or not, such rumors reveal the same unease, that Antarctica is more than ice, that it preserves worlds unknown. The convergence of myth with such discoveries is striking. Ancient traditions speak of lands swallowed by catastrophe, of realms hidden beyond reach. Plato's Atlantis is the most famous, but it is far from alone. Norse sagas tell of Fimbul winter, a great freezing that ended ages. In the Andes, tales speak of frozen realms inhabited by ancestral spirits. In India, myths of Shvetadvipa describe shining lands covered in white. Could these stories be fragmented memories of Antarctica, scattered across cultures after a cataclysm erased the continent from the living world? The alignment may be coincidence, but coincidence has often proven to be the language of truth forgotten. Secrecy amplifies the unease. Reports from expeditions often vanish or appear only in fragments. Satellite images of anomalies are blurred or removed. Independent explorers are restricted by treaty, their movements tightly controlled. Official voices insist this is to protect the environment, to preserve Antarctica as a wilderness, but suspicion lingers. When knowledge is withheld, even for noble reasons, it creates the impression of concealment. And concealment, whether deliberate or accidental, breeds speculation. What is being hidden? Is it simply fragile ecosystems, or something more? Something that might shatter the narratives we have built about ourselves? The philosophical weight of such a possibility is immense. If ruins of a forgotten civilization lie beneath the ice, it would mean that humanity is not at its beginning, but in its return. It would mean that the story of progress, of linear ascent from primitive to modern, is false. It would mean that civilizations have risen and fallen before, leaving only fragments buried beneath deserts, seas, and now ice. And if this is true, it forces us to confront not only our past, but our future. Are we too destined to vanish, our memory erased, leaving only myths for some distant people to rediscover? But even if no ruins exist, Antarctica still speaks the same truth. Its silence reminds us how fragile memory is, how easily entire chapters of history can vanish. A continent can disappear from human story, sealed away for millions of years, waiting only for technology and imagination to bring it back into thought. That lesson alone is enough to shake certainty, for it reveals that history is not secure, that knowledge is never final, and that forgetting is as powerful a force as remembering. Antarctica, then, becomes both presence and absence. It is a land we can measure but not know, a continent mapped yet concealed. To scientists, it is climate records, ice cores, tectonic scars. To dreamers, it is Atlantis, Hyperborea, or the ultimate vault of forgotten ages. To politicians, it is territory suspended, power restrained, resources untapped. Each perspective may hold a fragment of the truth, but none can resolve the whole. The silence of the continent ensures that it remains what it has always been, a riddle beyond final answers. The auroras ripple above its endless ice, their colors bending across the night as though the sky itself carries memory. The winds carve new shapes each day, only to erase them again in hours. Beneath it all, the land waits, unchanged, unmoved, as though indifferent to whether it is remembered or forgotten. And humanity, restless in the face of silence, continues to imagine, to fear, to hope, to ask. For in the end, perhaps the greatest mystery of Antarctica is not what it conceals, but why we cannot let it go, why its silence echoes louder than words, why its white vastness feels less like emptiness and more like a question pressed against the heart of history. And so the snow falls, the silence deepens, and the riddle waits, untouched, unbroken, timeless. The longer humanity gazes toward Antarctica, the more the continent becomes a mirror of our uncertainties. It does not merely stand as an expanse of ice, it reflects the fragility of memory, the limits of science, and the deep suspicion that our history is not as complete as we believe. Each discovery under its surface, a mountain range unseen, a subglacial lake preserved in silence, an anomaly too geometric for comfort, adds to the unease. Yet what makes Antarctica most haunting is not only the anomalies themselves, but the way they remain unresolved, suspended in ambiguity. Ambiguity has always been the seed of myth. In the absence of answers, myths grow like roots in darkness. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, a land beyond the north winds, where the sun never set and mortals mingled with the divine. Some saw this as an allegory for paradise, others as distorted memory of real lands. Could Hyperborea have been Antarctica before it froze, remembered through broken fragments of story? Similarly, Plato's tale of Atlantis resonates with unnerving parallels. A great land destroyed suddenly, swallowed by natural forces, its memory scattered. Though Atlantis is set in the Atlantic, the archetype it embodies, of civilizations erased, finds its most literal form in Antarctica's frozen silence. The land itself is myth incarnate, a continent erased so thoroughly that only ice remains to testify. Modern anomalies give these myths new weight. The Wilkes Land anomaly, stretching over 300 miles beneath the ice, continues to trouble both scientists and dreamers. Its form resembles a vast crater, possibly created by a cosmic impact. If this is true, then the force of such an event would have changed not only Antarctica, but the entire planet, perhaps triggering glaciation itself. And if glaciation came suddenly, sealing entire landscapes beneath ice, then the possibility of preserved ruins, forests, rivers, even human structures, cannot be dismissed entirely. The silence of the anomaly presses against us, refusing to yield a final answer. The same applies to the discovery of microbial life in Lake Vostok. For millions of years, the lake was sealed away from the atmosphere, isolated in eternal darkness. When Russian scientists finally reached its waters, they reported the presence of extremophils, organisms adapted to pressures and conditions no human had witnessed. Officially, these were microbes, but whispers grew of more unusual findings, of genetic sequences unaligned with known life. Whether true or not, the idea that Antarctica conceals ecosystems untouched for eons only strengthens its aura of mystery. If life can survive beneath miles of ice, what else might lie preserved in stillness, hidden from our knowledge? Suspicion is magnified by secrecy. Scientific data is often filtered, delayed, or published in fragments. Satellite images that once showed anomalies sometimes vanish or are blurred. Expeditions report findings in language so technical that the public cannot grasp their significance. And independent exploration is nearly impossible, restricted by treaties and guarded by the logistics of survival in such a hostile environment. Even if nothing extraordinary lies beneath the ice, the very structure of control creates an atmosphere of concealment. It is this concealment that sustains the idea that Antarctica is not only silent by nature, but silenced by intention. The deeper question is not only what lies beneath, but why we are compelled to search. Perhaps it is because Antarctica embodies the possibility of erasure so completely. We are used to ruins we can see, pyramids, temples, crumbling walls. But Antarctica suggests something worse. Not ruins revealed, but ruins locked away, beyond reach, beyond memory. It suggests that history itself can be hidden on a continental scale. And if that is true, then the story of humanity may be less a record and more a palimpsest, with entire chapters written over, lost to catastrophe, waiting in silence for rediscovery. The implications of such rediscovery are profound. If ruins were ever uncovered beneath the ice, they would force us to reconsider the timeline of civilization entirely. Our textbooks, which place the birth of organized culture at 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, would be shattered. A civilization advanced enough to map or inhabit Antarctica before the ice would mean our story stretches back far beyond what we now imagine. It would mean that humanity is not unique in rising, that others have risen before, only to be erased. It would cast our present not as the pinnacle of history, but as a fragile moment in a much older cycle. But even if Antarctica hides no civilization, the lesson remains the same. The ice itself is proof of how fragile knowledge is. Entire forests once thrived there. Now only ice remains. Rivers once flowed. Now valleys lie frozen. Life once flourished. Now silence rules. The memory of that fertile land was erased so completely that until fossils were discovered, no one could imagine it. This erasure is the truest warning Antarctica offers, that the Earth does not preserve history out of kindness. It buries without sentiment, conceals without regret. What we call permanence is only an illusion in the face of time, and so Antarctica becomes a paradox. It is both the most studied continent and the most unknown. It is both a place of data and a place of speculation. To scientists, it is climate records, glaciation, and geology. To dreamers, it is Atlantis, Hyperborea, and the lost vault of human memory. Both views may be incomplete, but both are necessary, for Antarctica is vast enough to contain them all. Its silence does not diminish under study. It only deepens, because each answer uncovers another layer of mystery. The auroras above the polar sky ripple like whispers of memory, colors shifting across the night, as though the heavens themselves remember what the earth has concealed. The winds sweep across glaciers, erasing every trace of those who pass. And beneath it all, the continent waits, whether it guards nothing but stone or the remains of forgotten civilizations, whether it conceals only silence or the echoes of memory too ancient to name. The snow falls endlessly, the silence grows heavier, and the riddle of Antarctica deepens with every unanswered question. The silence of Antarctica is not only physical, it is historical. It looms like a blank page in the record of humanity, a continent larger than Europe that seems to have no place in our collective story. The paradox is unbearable. A land so vast, so real, so tangible, yet absent from memory, absent from myth, except in fragments too scattered to name directly. To look at this absence is to feel the weight of forgetting pressed against the very edges of what we call history. And the more we try to fill that blank, the more it resists, giving back only suggestions, shadows, and hints of what might lie beneath. Consider the anomalies detected by satellites and radar. The Wilkes Land feature, massive and circular, may be a crater formed by cosmic impact, but its symmetry continues to spark doubt. A structure so vast, buried beneath ice, resonates with the imagination because it seems too precise, too deliberate. Elsewhere, radar scans reveal geometric ridges, long straight lines, and rectangular forms that nature rarely produces in such sharpness. Scientists explain these as natural, the chaotic beauty of geology. Yet the eye resists. Once a pattern is seen, it is impossible to unsee. And so the shapes beneath the ice, even if they are stone and chance, become part of the larger riddle. The power of that riddle grows when one recalls how often ruins once ridiculed as fantasy have emerged into light. Troy was myth until its stones rose from the earth. The city of Heracleion lay drowned for centuries before divers uncovered its statues beneath the Nile Delta. Angkor, hidden by jungle, was dismissed as legend until rediscovered. In each case, the silence of absence was broken, and what was thought impossible became undeniable. Antarctica carries this same potential, but magnified beyond measure. For while cities can be hidden by trees or sea, only ice can bury a continent whole. The silence is intensified by secrecy. Research in Antarctica is conducted under strict treaties, with limited access and controlled reporting. Some expeditions have returned with stories of anomalies, only for details to vanish into archives. Satellite images, once public, sometimes disappear or are blurred when anomalies appear too striking. Official explanations cite technical errors or environmental precautions. Perhaps that is all they are. Yet history has shown how easily truth can be withheld when it disrupts accepted narratives. Silence imposed by institutions is different from silence imposed by nature. But in Antarctica, the two blend seamlessly, creating a void that no voice can penetrate. The myths of catastrophe echo in this void. Stories from across the world speak of lands swallowed, peoples erased, worlds overturned. Plato's Atlantis perished in a single night of fire and flood. Norse sagas describe Fimbulwinter, the endless freeze that precedes Ragnarok. Andean myths tell of frozen realms where ancestral spirits dwell. Indian texts speak of Shvetadvipa, a radiant white land hidden far from reach. These myths are not identical, yet together they form a chorus of remembrance, a memory of catastrophe woven into human culture itself. Could Antarctica be the physical counterpart of these stories? The continent that proves myth and history are not opposites, but twins? Even the scientific record carries hints of sudden disaster. The younger Dryas cooling, some 12,000 years ago, brought abrupt shifts in climate, possibly triggered by comet impacts or massive floods. Landscapes were reshaped, species vanished, and civilizations that might have existed were erased. If such sudden events could occur once, why not again? What if Antarctica's great freezing was not a slow descent into cold, but a rapid burial, sealing landscapes, rivers, forests, and perhaps more in a moment of planetary upheaval? The frozen mammoths of Siberia, preserved with food still in their mouths, prove that sudden freezing is not only possible, but real. And if animals could be caught in such a grip, could not entire human settlements have shared the same fate? The philosophical weight of such speculation is immense. If ruins exist beneath the ice, their discovery would not simply add to our history, it would tear it open. It would prove that civilizations advanced enough to survey coastlines and construct monuments existed before the ice claimed Antarctica. It would imply that humanity's story is far older, more cyclical, more fragile than we allow. Progress would no longer be linear, but circular. We would see ourselves not as the pinnacle of history, but as one of its repetitions, destined perhaps to fall and be forgotten like those before us. The revelation would not only rewrite history, it would destabilize identity itself. And yet, even if no ruins lie beneath, Antarctica still carries the same lesson, for its silence proves that forgetting is as powerful as remembering. Entire forests once flourished there, yet only fossils remain to prove it. Rivers carved valleys, now locked in eternal night. A continent that once lived is now erased, its memory buried under white. This erasure is the true power of Antarctica. It shows us how easily the Earth itself can conceal, how thoroughly nature can bury truth. Even without ruins, it is the greatest monument to forgetting we have ever known. Perhaps this is why Antarctica unsettles us so deeply. It is not only about what might be hidden, but about what its silence means. It forces us to confront the fragility of our own age, to admit that our monuments too could be erased, our memory too could vanish, leaving only myths for those who come after. It is not only a continent of ice, it is a prophecy carved into the earth itself, a reminder that silence is the final fate of all civilizations. The auroras ripple across the polar sky, painting the ice with light that flickers and vanishes. The winds sweep endlessly, erasing every trace of passage, carrying no answers, only the echo of questions too vast to silence. And beneath it all, the continent waits, indifferent, unbroken, sealed in its perfect vault of white. The snow falls, the silence thickens, and the riddle of Antarctica deepens once more. The silence of Antarctica does not only speak of what is hidden beneath the ice, it also reflects how easily entire truths can be erased. In every age, humanity has imagined itself at the center of history. Yet Antarctica reminds us that we may stand on the ruins of cycles we cannot see. The continent feels less like a blank space on the map and more like a locked archive, where every mile of ice is a page pressed shut, refusing to open until the proper moment. To press against its surface with radar or satellite is to glimpse only shadows of what might be written there, fragments that stir both awe and unease. Among the most unsettling discoveries of recent years are the magnetic anomalies recorded beneath certain regions of the ice. Instruments measuring Earth's magnetic field show strange disruptions, zones where the readings spike sharply, as though something massive lies below, something denser than ordinary rock. Official explanations speak of iron-rich formations, remnants of geological upheaval, but the scale of these anomalies invites doubt. If natural, they are immense. If artificial, they suggest constructions or remnants beyond anything we can presently imagine. The ambiguity, as always in Antarctica, is heavier than certainty. This ambiguity resonates with patterns found elsewhere. Across the world, ruins once ridiculed as myth later emerged into light. Great Zimbabwe was dismissed by colonial voices as too sophisticated to be African until its true builders were acknowledged. The Maya cities were thought fantasy until explorers hacked through jungle to reveal their pyramids. Even the colossal ruins of Göbekli Tepe, buried deliberately beneath earth in Turkey, showed that human civilization is far older and more complex than once believed. If such revelations are possible in deserts and forests, why not beneath glaciers? The only difference is that ice conceals more perfectly than foliage or sand. The possibility of concealment has always haunted human imagination. Myths of lost lands echo across cultures. Atlantis swallowed by sea, Mu drowned in the Pacific, Lemuria erased from the Indian Ocean, Hyperborea frozen beyond reach. Each myth is different, yet together they speak of a pattern, that civilizations rise, only to vanish, leaving behind silence filled with fragments of memory. Antarctica, vast and frozen, is the most literal embodiment of these stories. Unlike myth, it exists as a tangible landmass, but like myth, it is shrouded in absence. In the 20th century, Antarctica became more than a scientific frontier. It became a theater of suspicion. Operation Highjump, led by Admiral Byrd in 1946-47, remains the subject of speculation. Officially, it was a massive naval exercise to test equipment in polar conditions. But the scale, 13 ships, thousands of men, aircraft, and resources, seemed excessive for mere training. The expedition ended abruptly, fueling rumors that something had been encountered, a force or anomaly that demanded withdrawal. Byrd's later remarks about threats emerging from polar regions were vague, yet they continue to echo in the imagination, feeding the suspicion that the silence of Antarctica is not only natural, but guarded. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 added another layer to the mystery. Nations locked in Cold War rivalry suddenly agreed to preserve the continent for peaceful purposes, suspending territorial ambitions and forbidding military presence. The treaty is often praised as a triumph of cooperation, but its speed and unanimity are remarkable. In a world where land and resources are fought over bitterly, why was an entire continent placed off limits? The official answer speaks of environmental protection and scientific unity. Yet the deeper suspicion remains. Was something discovered that required concealment? Was Antarctica sealed not only to preserve its wilderness, but also to guard a truth too disruptive to reveal? These questions grow heavier when paired with the continent's natural features. Subglacial lakes like Vostok, Ellsworth, and Whillans remain sealed, their waters isolated for millions of years. Microbes discovered in these environments prove that life can endure in extremes, but the absence of full disclosure about findings invites suspicion. Could stranger forms of life have been detected? Organisms unknown to science, or traces of something more complex? We are told only fragments, never the whole, and fragments, when incomplete, are often more haunting than silence itself. What unnerves most is that Antarctica seems designed to embody forgetting. Its ice does not merely erase, it preserves. Forests that once thrived there are proven by fossils, yet their memory is entombed in white. Valleys carved by rivers are frozen mid-gesture, their courses locked in time. If ruins or structures once stood upon its surface, they would not have decayed as they do in deserts or seas. They would remain sealed and pristine, frozen in perfect silence. The possibility of such preservation makes the continent feel like a time capsule too immense to open, its contents waiting, untouched, unseen. And so, humanity is left suspended between two possibilities. Perhaps Antarctica hides nothing but stone, water, and microbes, its anomalies all natural, its mysteries illusions of longing. If so, it still teaches us how fragile memory is, how easily continents themselves can vanish from history. Or perhaps beneath its ice lie the remnants of something extraordinary, a civilization erased by catastrophe, a chapter of human story so old and so alien to our current sense of time that we can hardly recognize it. Either way, the silence of Antarctica forces us to confront how much we do not know, and how little of our past may truly be secure. The auroras continue to dance across the skies above the continent, flickering like memory itself, bright, fleeting, impossible to grasp. The storms sweep across the ice, erasing every trace of human passage, returning the land to its eternal stillness. And beneath it all, Antarctica waits, sealed in silence, indifferent to the questions pressed upon it. What lies below remains untouched. Perhaps stone, perhaps ruins, perhaps nothing at all. Yet the weight of its silence ensures that the riddle will endure, echoing not in answers but in the endless snow that falls, in the endless absence that presses against history itself. Antarctica stands at the edge of our imagination like a closed book whose pages are bound in ice. We look at it with tools of science, with fragments of myth, with whispers of speculation, yet it refuses to yield. Its silence is both a barrier and a mirror. It keeps us at a distance, denying entry into its secrets, while at the same time reflecting our own uncertainty back at us. The more we gaze upon its expanse, the more we sense not answers, but questions. Questions that press harder with every storm, every aurora, every mile of white. The continent is not lifeless, though it appears so. Beneath the crushing weight of glaciers lie mountains sharp as blades, valleys deep as wounds, and lakes sealed for millions of years. Fossils speak of forests and reptiles, of rivers that once flowed in warmth. These truths alone remind us that nothing is permanent, that even the most desolate land was once alive. But it is not simply the transformation from forest to ice that haunts us. It is the thought of what else may have been erased, what other memories lie trapped beneath that frozen archive. For centuries, myths have echoed the theme of lost lands and forgotten civilizations. Atlantis drowned in a single night. Hyperborea vanished beyond impassable cold. Lemuria slipped beneath rising seas. Each story speaks of memory broken, of worlds erased. Science dismisses them as allegory, yet history shows how often allegory hides fragments of truth. Troy was once a myth, until it was unearthed. Heracleion was a legend, until divers touched its stones. What if Antarctica is the same? A myth in plain sight, awaiting rediscovery? What if its silence is not absence, but concealment? The fragments we have, maps showing coastlines without ice, anomalies in radar scans, unexplained magnetic signatures, are too scattered to form certainty. Yet together, they create a mosaic that refuses dismissal. Perhaps they are coincidence. Perhaps they are illusions born of longing. Yet if history has taught us anything, it is that fragments often lead to revelations. The first glimpses of ruins in jungles seemed meaningless until patterns emerged, until entire cities were revealed. The first whispers of drowned lands were dismissed until divers found temples beneath waves. Antarctica may be the greatest fragment of all, the fragment too vast to piece together, yet too compelling to ignore. The silence of the continent is magnified by secrecy. International treaties restrict access. Expeditions return with findings couched in careful, technical language. Satellite images blur anomalies or vanish entirely from public archives. Official voices insist that these measures protect fragile environments. Perhaps they do. Yet secrecy, even when innocent, invites suspicion. The less we are told, the more we imagine. And imagination, in the presence of Antarctica's silence, inevitably turns toward questions of what is hidden and why. What would it mean if ruins were found beneath the ice? It would mean that our history is not as young as we believe. It would mean that civilization has risen before, only to be erased by catastrophe. It would mean that progress is not linear, but cyclical, that memory is fragile, and that forgetting is as inevitable as death. The discovery would shake politics, religion, science, and identity. It would prove that we are not the first, and perhaps not the last. It would turn history into prophecy, reminding us that what was erased once may be erased again. And yet, even if no ruins exist, Antarctica still teaches the same truth. It shows us how fragile knowledge is, how easily continents themselves can vanish from memory. It proves that forgetting is not an accident, but a force of nature, as powerful as glaciers, as unstoppable as storms. Its silence is a lesson written not in words, but in absence. That history is not secure, that memory is never final, and that what we know is only a sliver of what once was. Perhaps this is why Antarctica unsettles us so deeply. It forces us to admit that our place in time may not be as unique as we pretend. It whispers that civilizations are not eternal, that silence can swallow all memory, that one day our monuments too will vanish, sealed beneath the indifference of the earth. To look at Antarctica is to glimpse our own fate written in white, a fate where the world endures, but our story does not. The auroras above shimmer like fragile threads of memory, flickering and vanishing into night. The winds sweep across the plains, erasing every trace of those who dared to pass. The glaciers groan, shifting with the weight of ages, indifferent to our questions. And beneath it all, the continent waits, whether it conceals only stone or the echoes of civilizations long erased, whether it holds nothing or everything. Antarctica does not answer. It never will. Its silence is too deep, too complete, too final. But in that silence, we hear ourselves more clearly than ever, the fragility of memory, the hunger for meaning, the fear of oblivion. And perhaps that is the true secret of the frozen continent, not what it hides, but what it forces us to see. The snow falls endlessly, binding the land tighter with every storm. The silence grows heavier, pressing against the edges of thought. And in that silence, the riddle of Antarctica remains, untouched, unbroken, eternal.